Yeah, I'm just going to keep moving. Good evening. I would welcome all on this side of the table, as well as in the audience, to the Tuesday, November 26, 2013 organizational and regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education. Present is Mr. Paul Fattabine, Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. John Convertito, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mrs. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, Mr. John Llewellyn, Mr. Mark Patton, and sorry, I can't get all of the 4 names out there, but the 2 students from Ludlow and 1 student from Ward. So welcome, one and all. If I could ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As you know, this is our organizational meeting first, where we elect the officers following the last election. And according to our bylaws, we have, by custom, asked the superintendent to serve as the temporary chair and secretary while we do this initial business. And so the recommended motion is on the agenda that in accordance with the bylaws, Superintendent Dr. David Title will serve as temporary chairman/secretary during the election of board officers. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Kennelly and Mrs. Gerber. Any discussion on that motion? No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. We have it as unanimous. The motion is approved. Meeting is yours.
Okay, thank you. So the first item, B1, is the election of the Board of Education Chairman. So the floor is open for nominations. Mr. Patton.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Phil Dwyer as chairman.
Okay, Mr. Dwyer nominated. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Convertito. Do you accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination.
All right. Any further nominations? Okay. No other nominations. Nominations are now closed. We'll now proceed to a vote. All in favor of Mr. Dwyer as chairman, please say aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Mr. Fattabine. Okay. Opposed? Mr. Llewellyn, Ms. Lou McCormick. All right. The motion passes 7-2. Election of vice chairman. Do we have a nomination for vice chairman? Mr. Convertito.
I nominate Mr. Paul Fattabine as vice chair.
All right. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Kennelly. Do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing no other nominations, nominations are closed. All in favor of Paul Fattabine as vice chairman, please raise your hand and say aye. Unanimous. Nominations are open for Board of Education Secretary. Do we have any nominations? Ms. Lou McCormick.
I'd like to nominate Donna Carnell.
Donna Carnell, is there a second? Second, Mr. Llewellyn, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for Secretary? Fattabine?
Jessica Gerber.
Jessica Gerber, is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Convertito. You accept?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Any other nominations? All right, we have 2 nominations for Board of Education Secretary. Nominations are now closed. All in favor of Ms. Carnell, please raise your hand, say aye. No.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Where am I? 3. Okay. All in favor of Mrs. Gerber? 6. Mrs. Gerber is elected by a vote of 6 to 3. That concludes the election of board officers. I'm done being chair.
Well, he was an effective chair for about 5 minutes. I would not be an effective superintendent for even half that amount of time. First, I want to say thank you to the board for re-electing me. I take that role as chair of the board seriously, and I treat it as an honor. I know that men don't normally carry pictures of their grandchildren around, but this is a picture of my grandchild. He's Jack. He's 2 years old, just about. And I keep it from time to time to remind me of the responsibility of us as board members, that not only do we make decisions for today, but we're really making decisions for future generations of children, the next ones who are born but are not yet in the system. And so we have to make sure that the decisions we make are good for not just today, but for the future. So I am convinced that there are volunteers up in Rochester, New York, where Jack is, who are sitting at a table just as we are, with the same responsibility to ensure the future and the quality of their public school system. And so just as they take it seriously, we take it seriously. I will repeat what I said last year when I got elected, is that I see my role as a facilitator to make sure that 8 members, plus the students who wish to comment on items from time to time, have an opportunity to speak and express their viewpoints, and to make sure that it is equally balanced between those who may be in favor of a motion or those who may not be in favor of a motion. I see Robert's rules not as a constraint on anybody's ability to speak and express their viewpoint. It's actually meant to ensure that the majority can act, but that the minority don't lose their voice. And so I think if we properly use Robert's rules, both will get accomplished. Of course, the golden rule of Robert's rules, if there is one, is that we should always debate the principles, not the personalities. We should always debate the motion and not the motives, question the motives behind that. That's probably a good rule for people who come here for public comment, of course. But one last new comment, and then we'll move on to our regular item. At the orientation meeting for the 4 new board members, I made a comment that said, think of this as the first day of the rest of your life. You've all heard that statement. And what I mean by that is really for the whole board. I don't believe that we have 4 members joining 5 existing members. I believe that we have 9 members who have an equal voice and an equal vote for their service on this board. Some come with different sets of experience, as we all do, and so hopefully we can come in here with 9 different viewpoints and leave with 1 decision. So thank you again. Having said that, let's move on to the regular meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we could just have the vice chair take a seat at the head table?
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have invited Mr. Fattabine to come forward earlier. I do thank you for that correct point of order, or whatever it was. Now, but Mr. Fattabine, did you have your own individual comment?
On my own
Then please.
item of interest.
Then certainly I will...
Well, I guess, I believe our bylaws require a review of the bylaws at the organizational meeting.
Yes.
So, since we're at our organizational meeting now, I would ask for the board's unanimous consent to review our bylaws at this time.
Mr. Fattabine is correct. We split them because we anticipated both the presentations and recognition of the PTA delegates, as well as a representative from the AP or College AP organization. And with train schedules, we wanted to be able to get them up early and then be able to get them on their way. And that's why we split it, so that the board knows there was some rationale for it. But if you wish to pursue that, then you're in order to do so. I just wanted to explain why it was split.
Yeah, no, I just thought, since the bylaws require us to review it at the time of the organizational meeting, that's the time we should probably do it. I would propose some amendments that I think hopefully will not be too
Well,
complex.
let me Mr. Fattabine asked for unanimous consent that we have that agenda item moved up to the current place. Is there any objection to that? Is there any objection to that? Then by unanimous consent, we will do so.
All right.
Now, let me make a comment on the bylaws, since we're now at that agenda item for the benefit of the new members. What we normally do is bring ideas forward. Some people bring ideas that are fully written out and their language is clear, and others bring a concept forward, and we ask them to get us the language, the specific language, so that we can act on it December 10th. We're not here to act on them tonight. We're here to act on, get ideas, and then proceed to December 10th. Certainly, if the board wants to, and they feel that there's something that they're ready to act on tonight, and the language is there, we've noticed that we're going to review the bylaws. There's no reason why we can't. By custom, over the last several years, we've allowed board members to think about a proposal from one meeting to the next. So that's the process we've sometimes used. Mr. Fattabine, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would have reviewed the bylaws, and I would suggest two or three amendments, hopefully none of which are too controversial, and merely put more specifically in place what we generally do, but a little more clearly. And that is, the first I would propose an amendment to, see if I can get the page.
Yeah.
It's section,
You have
Article 1, Section 3, Item C.
on Section 3.
Under Secretary. It's on page 3 of the bylaws. And I could, so if you go to the paragraph, and you go to the last sentence that starts with the word minutes, before that last sentence, I would insert an additional sentence. And that additional sentence would be, "The minutes shall accurately record the essence of discussions during the board meetings without discrimination based on viewpoint." And that would be my proposed amendment to that, to the bylaws.
You have several. Do you want to treat each one as a separate motion?
I think it's probably, it's probably useful to, I can do them all, there's two others I have that are minor as well, I believe, so we can do it at the chair's discretion all as one, or?
We'll treat them as separate amendments.
Okay.
Could you repeat it?
The location as well, or just the words?
No, just the sentence itself.
The minutes shall accurately record the essence of discussions during the board meetings without discrimination based on viewpoint. It merely reflects that the minutes should accurately depict what has occurred at the meeting, irrespective of that individual's viewpoint at that time. So we're not going to discriminate.
Well, let me get the motion on the table first, and then I'll come back to you for...
Well, we
so-
may not have to, but all right.
Well, does everybody understand the motion that Mr. Fattabine wishes to make? And is there a second on that motion?
I second that.
Mr. Llewellyn seconds it. Please finish your...
So it's
commentary.
basically, I think, putting into place more specifically what we currently do in a sense of, you know, that clearly the minutes should reflect the essence of the meeting or the discussions at the meetings, and that, you know, those minutes are not, or the viewpoints are not necessarily discriminated against, irrespective of what their viewpoint is, which I think is fair and reasonable, and really, in essence, is what is done in general. So it's not, I believe it shouldn't be too controversial, it just makes it more expressed and explicit in the bylaws that that's what we do. We treat people's views fairly.
I generally go to the second person, this person who seconded, to see if they have a comment, and then open the board discussion.
You know, I agree. I think the minutes should reflect what is stated rather than being filtered or added to leave a bias. I think that we've heard from public comment over the last several meetings that people's views weren't accurately reflected, so I do support.
Any other comments from board members? Mr. Fattabine and I have, Mr. Convertito.
Yeah, if I could just get one more read back of the whole change, or the whole sentence.
The change is one sentence,
Right.
and it's, "The minutes shall accurately record the essence of discussions during the board meetings without discrimination based on viewpoint." And that would be inserted before the last sentence of the paragraph under secretary.
Okay, thank you.
I have copies for the secretary.
Okay.
So she can accurately record the motion.
So a comment, and then if any other board members have comments. I don't object to the sentiment, but Robert's Rules actually does say that minutes should reflect the actions taken at board meetings, not the conversation. Number two, that we do have and maintain a audio recording of these meetings for whatever length of time the Secretary of State tells us we should, which is a rather long time, so that whenever there's a question as to what somebody said or did not say, we're able to go back to that audio tape and be able to know exactly what was said, rather than somebody's interpretation of what was said by putting it in the minutes. And I will say that it's very difficult for the secretary, who's a secretary of this board, as well as the secretary in the office, when they are trying to capture somebody's comments, and maybe they speak for 3 minutes, and this is not a transcript of the meeting, so what part of that 3 minutes, quote, accurately records it? It's a very judgmental call to begin with. And so, as Mr. Fatterby knows, I've always been in favor of less is more, and that not try and interpret by trying to figure out what is an accurate recording. I won't support this, not because I don't believe we shouldn't be accurately recording, but that I think that would make the minutes go from 11 pages to 22 pages or whatever. So that's my viewpoint. Mrs. Connelly.
Looking for clarification through the chair to Mr. Fatterbean, because obviously terminology is everything here. When you say the essence of discussion, for me to support that, I would want it to be clear that that does not, that you are not intending that to mean a transcript, because on the one hand, I do enjoy having detailed minutes. It's been invaluable, and to have to go back and actually watch a whole meeting would be a bit arduous, and I have referenced previous minutes. I would not interpret the essence of discussion as being transcript, but I do think, that if someone spoke in favor of, that would capture the essence of a discussion. Is that what you intend it to be understood as?
The reason the word essence in there was for that precise reason. I don't expect a transcript, but you want the essence or the point of view that a person has to be somehow reflected in the minutes, and it can be relatively short. But because it occurred at a meeting, and in many instances the written minutes are the only retained record for any substantial period of time, it should reflect the essence, in essence, of what transpired, so that a reviewer later on, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, can accurately depict the general gist of what transpired at that meeting and what people had
You have a
concerns
second
with.
question?
No, just follow up to that.
No.
So just to be clear, that if someone, for example, spoke at 3 minutes in support of whatever it is, and the minutes reflected so-and-so spoke in support of, is that your idea of capturing the essence of the discussion?
It depends on the situation. If they had a certain point of view, you can summarize it very briefly that they spoke in support of because they were familiar with it and were in support of it. So some general sense as to some indication. It could be very short, it could be a word or two. It doesn't have to be long. The only intent is that when these minutes are reviewed, when they're not refresh in our recollection, there is some hint at what the feeling was at the time of the meeting, so that people can appreciate what was discussed and what was going on, what the controversy may have been, what some of the pluses and minuses were. It's just a way in which the minutes can be more helpful when reviewed in the future, and people's recollections may not be clear, but it can jog their recollections. Oh yeah, they've spoken support, and they spoke in support because they had 3 children in the school system or something, and some rationale as to why, not just a mystery as to, they don't have a clue as to why the decisions were made in what way. That's the purpose is clearly just, as I say, not to get a transcript, not to make it unduly burdensome, but just to indicate the essence of the meeting so a reviewer can then later on understand and appreciate the meeting better than better, that's all.
Okay, Mrs. Carnell and Ms. Carnell, and then Mr. Patton.
I would think that in this day and age with modern technology, why isn't there a system that just can record all the minutes?
Well, we do. That's right behind you.
Right, so then, no, I saw that. So the question is, why do we need additional minutes? What's the difference, or what am I missing? And, to your point is, whenever anybody writes something down, whether they're capturing everything or one line of it, they're still interpreting it through their filter. So that's a given. So why not just have a system, a machine, capture the minutes?
Thank you. Mr. Patton.
Through the chair to Dr. Title,
Well, can I interrupt just for one? I'm sorry, from time to time, I'll do this for the benefit of the new members. If you find this irritating, just tell me to stop doing it. There is a tradition that we say, when we have a question, we say through the chair to, and Jennifer perhaps forgot that, and we frequently forget to do that, but nonetheless, that's what Mr. Patton is meaning. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair to Dr. Title, how long does the central office keep the recordings, the audio recordings, and do we keep, or does Fair TV keep the video recordings? And then I have a comment.
I don't know that we have any official disposal schedule of them. We just keep them. I don't know. I'd have to check. Fair TV, I'm not sure what they do
But
with it.
we do comply with state statutes
Right.
to keep the recordings for as long as state statutes require them, which is a reasonably lengthy time period, but
Any idea what that time period is?
I don't have.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
And Fair TV, somebody here might know how far back you can still click in and on your home computer get a copy of the recording, but I've seen them there for a year or so.
Okay.
You had a comment that
So,
you wanted to
yeah,
make.
so my comment to the motion is, first off, through the chair to Mr. Fattabine, when you said the essence of is kind of to include the because of the reason to get the sentiment of behind what the person might have said. I have a slight issue with that because, again, that's kind of what the recordings are for. Maybe, if this was a decade ago, there would be different, it would be a different situation. But because we have those recordings and you can go back, sometimes I feel like, again, too many minutes are too lengthy minutes are sometimes, burdensome. Yes, it's always convenient to have that option if you really need to go back and try and figure out what somebody meant by that. But the other thing I'd have to say is in all the meetings in different bodies that I've either been on or corporate America or whatever where Robert's Rules of Order are used, the sentiment is exactly what Mr. Dwyer said. It's to get the facts down on paper, whether it's a vote, whether it's were you in support of something or against something, if there was a quote that somebody wanted in the record, obviously they can state and request that. But it wasn't meant to have, a 20-page manuscript at each meeting. It was meant to keep things quick and concise and to make sure that the accurate legal decisions that a particular board makes go on record. So the because aspect, I kind of have a little problem with that would go, just getting to be too much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishes to speak? 1, 2, and then Mr. Fattabine, I think, wants to wrap up the conversation. Mrs. Carnell first.
Ms. Cornell.
Ms. Carnell, I'll get that right.
We're all new at this tonight. I guess the question is, in being new, I didn't get a response to my comment. If we do have minutes that are being recorded, what is the reason for the additional minutes that are being handwritten? Because to Mark's point, if I may, corporate America, they use electrical. They don't use handwritten. They use machines to take down all the minutes.
I think Mr. Fattabine, in promoting the motion, said what he thought the rationale was, but let me get Mr. Llewellyn's comment on, and then perhaps Mr. Fattabine can comment on either of the final two comments.
I can comment on both of them.
Sure.
Well, first, let me get to
Thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
And I guess through the chair to Dr. Title, are the audio tapes actually available online or just Fair TV?
We don't put them online.
Okay. And I guess my comment in follow-up to that, if anyone is, although, Fair TV is a great service, and it's great to be able to go back and watch the video, but if anyone's tried to find a soundbite, it's exceedingly difficult because of the fact that it's several hours long, and to scroll back and forth is very, very difficult because of the browser app that's being used. So I think to have a sheet of paper that someone can look at and, go and get the essence, and then if they really want to take a deep dive, they can go to the Memorex. So that's my thought.
So, Mr. Fattabine, and then perhaps we're ready to take action. Mr. Fattabine.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the audio transcripts are not kept for any substantial length of time, certainly not as long as the written record and the official minutes. You also have to realize these are the minutes that we approve at the meeting as well, so they're the official record of what happened at the meeting. We have no control over Fair TV as to how long they retain their records, so I don't know if that's relevant at all. And I really am not, I'm surprised that this is as controversial as it appears to be, because it merely indicates that we're just having a accurate record of the minutes that are written and the official minutes of our body. And the essence was included in there to say it doesn't have to be a transcript. The minutes I foresee not being any longer. It can be very short, but just is required now to include, maybe the controversial part is, they're not going to be discriminated against with respect to viewpoint. But they should, in essence, be an accurate record irrespective of viewpoint, because viewpoints change. And what may not have been a popular viewpoint at one time, and therefore may or may not have been included in the minutes, may change a couple years henceforth and become a more popular viewpoint. And it's nice to know that that viewpoint at that time, what it was. And those are the minutes are the only thing that is going to be recollected or even reviewable, because in many situations the audio tape may not be in existence anymore. The written records are kept as a permanent record, I believe, and is the official record that's voted on by the board at the subsequent meeting after the minutes have been drafted. I'm really surprised it's controversial. I don't think it's a big deal, but evidently members do think it's a big deal.
To Mr. Fattabine's comment, if I might ask our administrative assistant who keeps the audio recordings, have you ever thrown one out? No. You have them from, you're the keeper of the records, they've been there for long before you were there. Yep. So you got drawers full. Okay. If I would like to move the agenda, we'll have Mr. Patton, and then Mrs. Lou McCormick.
One thing I forgot to mention before is that if by changing the bylaws, it's, there's no choice. These are the way that every secretary, until the bylaws are changed again, is going to have to take minutes. But leaving them alone, there's no reason why we can't add more things and add the, the essence of the discussions, and, if that's the sentiment that the board wants to go, the bylaws don't preclude that from happening. The other thing that I'm kind of worried about is if we start to get specifics in how minutes are being taken at a town meeting for this body, that other bodies might suddenly try and rock the boat, and, it might cause a little bit of a stir.
We'll let the other bodies handle. Mrs. Lou McCormick. And is that the final comment, so we're ready to vote? We have one more after that, okay.
So I think one clarifying point for this discussion is that I'm assuming that right now the minutes are taken and they're basically supposed to be reflecting the essence right now anyways. So this motion is not about changing, but basically commenting on how we should do what we're currently doing right now. So this is not a motion as to whether we should just be using the transcript, a straight transcript, or whether we should be summarizing. I think they are already summarizing in our minutes. The question is if we continue to do it the way we are now, which is summarizing, do we want to make sure that it is done without discrimination or bias? That's my understanding. So just to clarify, because I think we're talking about two different motions, and we just want to focus on doing what we're doing now, but without bias.
We're
Is that
talking
right?
about two different concepts. We do have a single motion. Mrs. Kennelly.
I was actually going to say something similar to Ms. Lou McCormick, and the comment being, obviously, considering that Mr. Fattabine nominated our current secretary, it's obviously to a degree an endorsement of the way that things have been done, and an indication that this is not supposed to change what we're doing now at present at all, in that it's the essence of the conversation, which I believe is what we are doing now. This should not be adding any length. The idea of without discrimination based on viewpoint, I don't believe has been happening, and so my only question is the need for saying this, if it is capturing what we are presently doing. We always have before us the possibility of amending the minutes, of not approving them when they come before us. There's no set of minutes that we don't, that doesn't take place with. So I guess my only question is this needed when we already have the vehicle in place for amending them as needed?
So can we, one last comment, Mr. Convertito.
Through the chair to the vice chair. Are you making the motion because you believe and perceive that the previous minutes have shown bias? Or discrimination towards any speaker?
No. I'm making the motion because I believe it's a fair thing to do, and there's the possibility that secretaries may change and things may happen. And I think I don't necessarily understand the controversy. There's nothing, I would think we can all agree that we certainly wouldn't want to modify our record based on viewpoint. So I don't see, that's not necessarily a controversial item. I indicated the essence of the discussion, meaning that it can be as brief as it is now, as long as the essence is there. The only intent is that, as my intent is always, is that the record should be accurate and it should reflect what transpired, whether we agree with it or not, because that's the record, and that's what transpired. And I don't know why it's so controversial, other than for some unknown reason to
I'm not saying it
me.
is controversial, and if I could just follow up then, because
Convertito. And can I make this the last comments? Because we have a long agenda item and people to make presentations.
if I could ask you to and offer a friendly amendment, is to take out the word discrimination or biased and just make it the meeting shall accurately record the essence of board discussions before the board without regard to any speaker's viewpoint.
That's a request. Again, while Mr. Fattabine is thinking of that friendly amendment, Robert's rules, the motion belongs to the board. It no longer belongs to Mr. Fattabine. By custom, we have asked the maker of the motion if they would accept a friendly amendment, and if no board members object to that, then we accept it as a friendly amendment. If a board member objects to it, well, then we have... Well, you can certainly say I decline.
I object
Okay.
to making unanimous consent.
Yeah.
There's a reason I use the word discrimination, and that is this case law that prevents the chair from recognizing speakers and discriminating against speakers based on their viewpoint. There's case law to support that.
Sure.
So the word discrimination is used in that case law. So this is in essence transcribing what the case law prevents the chair to do in preventing recognizing speakers based on viewpoint. So I think it's appropriate to use that word because the case law supports that word.
Any other final comments? If not, are we ready to make the motion? The public who is here, who's accustomed to on votes, we can ask members of the public for comment on administrative matters that deal with the operations of the board, whether they're elections or approving the minutes or something like this. We do not take public comment. It is just comment from the board. We do have
I do have a final comment,
Yeah.
thank you. I do believe that what the vice chair has put forth here is for the sake of clarity and transparency. So for anyone to object to that, I find that interesting. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is everybody clear on the motion, or do you wish Mr. Fattabine to reread it?
He could reread it, please.
Please reread it, the motion.
The motion is to amend Article 1, Section 3, Paragraph C, Secretary, after or before the last sentence thereof, to insert, "The minutes shall accurately record the essence of discussions during the board meetings without discrimination based on viewpoint." Is it fairly?
Everybody clear? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. I have Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mrs. Carnell, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed. Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Patton, and Mrs. Cannelli. The motion is approved 5-4 and is passed. Can I pass that over to the secretary? So it's this here?
I got some other ones on there, but... Hopefully this won't be as controversial, this next one. This is Article 5, Section 3,
Get everybody there first.
A. See if I can find it. I'll get the page in a minute, I hope. Notice of board members, it's on page 8 of the bylaws. I'll read the whole sentence because it may be clear. Notice of each meeting of the board and agenda. I deleted prepared by the superintendent, comma, listing all proposed action at such meeting and inserting and including all referenced documents shall be delivered to each member of the board at least 5 days prior to such meeting. Subject to each board member's consent, deleting, the superintendent may deliver notice and the agenda, and inserting, delivery may be made electronically. So basically, I believe it's currently what we're doing, but a little differently, in the sense that it specifically requires the including of all documents, or including of all reference documents delivered. I believe they are currently delivered, but there was didn't specifically specify that. And that I just made that last sentence a little differently, in the sense, made it shorter. Delivery may be made electronically. That's the current practice if the board member consents. And I got rid of the superintendent may deliver notices and agenda because I don't think he really does it. It's the administration that does it, or someone from the office does it. And the agenda, I believe,
Can I get the motion on the table so that we can then debate it? The motion is made. Is there a second?
I'll second that
Mr.
again.
Llewellyn seconds. Please continue your argument.
and my belief was that the agenda is prepared by, in essence, the chairman in consultation and agreement with the superintendent. So it's really the chairman that does the agenda. So I just thought it was a little more accurate that it refers to the chairman prepares the agenda. You know, it doesn't say the agenda prepared by the superintendent, when it's really prepared by the chair in consultation and collaboration with the superintendent. But I believe it's really the chair's obligation.
You finished?
That's it.
Who seconded it? I'm sorry.
I did.
Mr. Llewellyn, do you have a comment?
I was, a question, okay, or comment?
A comment?
Okay.
Or either.
Okay.
Question or
D-
comment.
And does that include the posting of it on the website for the general public?
That would be the next, I can go on, we can do this at one time. The item I would do as either combined motion or second motion, notice to the public. I can add that to my motion if you like.
In response to Mr. Llewellyn's
All right,
question, why don't you tell us what you have in mind?
It was just adding on the paragraph B, right under that last paragraph A, add a last sentence where it says, "The agenda and all reference documents shall be made available to the public on the board's website and at such meeting." Basically, that's sort of what we're doing. They're certainly available at the meeting. This just specifically says they're going to be available at the meeting. And I believe they're available on the board's website as well. So it really just sort of put specific language indicating what we're currently doing, just in case there's any doubt or any concern, or
Yeah,
that-
okay.
that's what we're doing.
Two comments. The agenda and documents are posted on our website when, Mrs. Brown? Friday morning, so you're not changing the 24 hours, so that already happens.
Right.
It is already posted on Friday morning, all of the documents. So what part of this second piece is a change from our current practice, or is just a clarification?
I think, as I read it, there was no requirement to post the reference documents under the bylaws as they currently existed, so it just adds the
Yeah,
reference.
It's a clarification. We do, that's our current practice, but
That's
it's
what I
a
thought, yeah.
clarification.
It just,
Okay.
it makes it more
Does that
specific.
answer your question, Mr. Llewellyn?
Well, it does, and, one of the things I found difficult is going back and trying to find the attachments in history. So I've found that if I come to the meetings, I'm able to get a lot of the attachments, but if I miss the meeting, I find it difficult to find some of the attachments. So I very much agree that it should be out there as a record for the public, for transparency, so that anyone can look to see, what's been put forth.
Yeah, the documents in the agenda are published on the website each Friday. I think the impact of Mr. Fatabean's motion would be two parts. We do, by practice, electronically send this information out on a Thursday, and then hand-deliver it in paper copy on the Friday. By doing it on Thursday, that meets the 5-day requirement. If it was required to be delivered on Thursday, a printed copy, that essentially takes 1 day away from the preparation process. And so just so that you know that that's a 1-day change, that it would have to be, materials would have to be in sooner so that all the documents were ready on Wednesday so that they could get delivered on Thursday.
Well, we're trying to be efficient. On Friday, packets go out, and silly to go run people out to board members' houses Thursday, and then run them back out on Friday. So I want to make sure we understand what you're asking us to do.
I'm missing a change.
I think that
I don't want to
Mr.
create more work
Yeah,
for us.
I may respond wrong, and I'll ask Mr. Fatabean to correct. I believe that he's anticipating that instead of the Friday delivery of packets, we will have a Thursday delivery of packets. Am I correct?
No, I'm not really, if they're delivered electronically, if you look at the,
Oh,
I changed,
okay.
it
Yep.
said, subject to each board member consent, delivery may be made electronically. So if you go to the preceding sentence where the 5 days is, delivered to each member of the board at least 5 days before, they can be physically or electronically. There can be, so I don't think that changes the date of time.
Unless an individual board member says, I don't want it
Right,
electronic.
and that's the
Okay.
only case.
Now, the second comment I would make for board members is that I'm going to say 90% of the material is delivered electronically, as well as in a hard copy the following day. There are documents from time to time that are 75, 80, 100 pages long that we do not try and deliver electronically. There's too many, it's too bulky, and that also that means that you're required on your home printer to print out, and especially if a document is printed in color and you don't have a color copier, then you end up printing out a document and maybe it's not as readable, and so there are times where that kind of a thick document is delivered on a Friday and is not part of the electronic, but that's probably 3 documents a year. I mean, it's not that many, but that does occur. Now, first and second, comments by the board. Mrs. Liu?
Just in clarification of
McCormick.
what you just said, so am I to understand that if you deliver me a hard copy, that I would not be able to expect an electronic copy? Or can I receive both?
You can, board members receive both.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Patton?
First off, can we get a read back on both of those, more the first one? And again, to Ms. Llewellyn's point, Mrs. Llewellyn, blah, 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 blah. What happens when you have 3 names?
Now, out of humor, that might be an accurate reflection of what Mr. Patton said, but it won't be in the minutes.
Yes, is the sentiment going to be in there? If we so
Unless that was the
choose to
essence.
receive a 100-page document electronically as well, can we request that?
I don't see why not. Sure. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
It's really been meant to save your home ink.
Sometimes, at least for me, it's easier to flip through pages on an iPad quicker than I can
Sure.
with a paper
Yeah,
document. It's, you know,
Yeah,
you
talk
just
with
trim
Meg
some-
and work that out.
Right, okay. So if we could have a read back of the,
Okay, we'll read it back for the sake of voting. Is there any other comments that people wish to make on that? If not, I'll ask Mr. Fattabine to read. Why don't we combine the two motions, because I think that was Mr. Llewellyn's suggestion, and do I hear any complaints with any objections to that friendly amendment? Hearing none, read both.
You want me to read the whole paragraph with the insertions and deletions?
As the whole, yes.
All right, this is notice to board members, paragraph A. Notice of each meeting of the board and agenda, deleting, prepared by the superintendent, continuing with listing all proposed action at such meeting, inserting, and including all reference documents, shall be delivered to each member of the board at least 5 days prior to such meeting. Subject to each board member's consent, deleting, the superintendent may deliver notice and the agenda. Inserting, delivery may be made electronically.
That's the change to A, and you had a change to B as part of this motion.
Right, change to B, notice to public. Adding a sentence to that paragraph. The agenda and all reference documents shall be made available to the public on the board's website and at such meeting.
Any questions on the motion that is before you? Are we ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mrs. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Llewellyn, Mrs. Connelly, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Dwyer, all opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Convertito, the motion passes 8-0 and 1, and so the packets look for Thursday deliveries instead of Friday deliveries. We won't be doing both Thursday and Friday.
So we have to have a Friday packet when there's Thursday?
Electronically Thursday,
That's current practice,
that's current practice.
so nothing changes.
You think nothing, okay, nothing changes, we're just clarifying. Nothing changes, we're just clarifying. Now, having said that, nothing is changing, we're clarifying by the motion maker's comment.
The only exception is if someone doesn't get it.
The exception would be if somebody doesn't get it electronically, that's correct. Were those your three, or?
That's all I guess
Okay.
I was...
Now, I'll recognize you in a second, Mr. Convertito. Let me just make one comment. The representative from the AP,
It's coming soon.
okay, is not yet in the room. So, Mr. Convertito, my intent for the boards to know is that once the person from the AP who is delayed on the train gets here, if I could go back to her presentation or his presentation so we can accommodate their schedule. So we'll continue through business until such happens. Mr. Convertito.
To the chair, now we've amended the bylaws, and there is nobody responsible for preparing the agenda. Who do we hold accountable now? You said you had two, you said you had three amendments. I thought you were
I
done.
was negligent in not pursuing this other one that would have clarified that. And I
Oh, I'm
thought I
sorry.
was done, but I guess I
Okay.
was not.
First, let me get the wording of the one we just passed so I can give it to the
She
secretary.
has
So I
that.
have that, I need the second one.
And I'm going to
second
give her the
one.
second one.
Second one.
That's right.
That's the second one.
But that both may not be done, only one may be done. But I'll let her figure
That's the
that out.
second one. You still have one. So you have a third amendment
Third
that you'd like
amendment.
to make that will answer Mr.
Convertito-
Convertito's
right.
question.
I apologize. In my haste, because I knew I'd considered this, or it was considered. This is in the bylaws. I got to figure where it is. It's under the agenda item, which is, I believe, on page 9.
Yeah, see if you don't mind, since she's here.
Oh, You can deal with it now if you want to postpone this.
We'll find if she's ready. I want to give her some.
Yeah, I don't care.
So describe
Right,
what
this
you're
is sort of a
talking about.
clarification. On the agenda item, on page 9 of the bylaws, it's C, agenda. I would insert another paragraph to that, so the amendment would be to number that first paragraph 1, and insert a second paragraph 2, the second paragraph being, the chairperson, in consultation with the superintendent and vice chairperson, shall have the responsibility to prepare the agenda for each meeting.
Okay, so, are we ready? She's here. Okay, so we have the concept in front of you. We won't take it as an official motion, because otherwise we'd have to dispose of it before we move on to the AP presentation. And so out of courtesy to the speaker who has traveled through whatever schedule of travel she was to get here, we can move to that immediately. So, Dr. Title, so for the public, we're going back to the agenda item that is the AP presentation. Dr. Title.
Yes. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Boyce in a second, but we were very pleased to be notified by the College Board that we received an advanced placement honor roll recognition. And if you look at a enclosure that I put in under the superintendent's report, the last page of that shows a 10-year history of our AP participation and success that those students have had. And we're really great to see that the College Board recognized the progress we'd made. So I'll ask Dr. Boyce to take it over. We have a little presentation to make, and then we'll ask the representative from the College Board to make the official award. So, Dr. Boyce.
Sure. We are very pleased to be able to recognize our advanced placement program. Each of our high schools offers almost 20 courses in 7 different content areas. And our focus has been on extending the offerings and increasing the enrollment in the AP program, while at the same time supporting students to work at higher levels of thinking and analyzing and writing. So I believe this award shows that our hard work has paid off. The hard work of our students, teachers, and school staff has resulted in Fairfield being named this year to the National AP Honor Roll. Before the formal presentation, I would like you to hear from teachers and students who actually participate in this program. And so first, I would like to introduce 2 of our students, Corbinian Warner and Daria Efmov.
Welcome. I will say that I had the pleasure of one of your company at Rotary the other day. Please.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daria Efmov, and I am currently a senior at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I would like to take a moment to share with you my experiences in AP classes. My first AP class was AP Economics, which I took as a sophomore because my dad works on Wall Street. I thought I would follow in his footsteps. I no longer want to work on Wall Street. I also took AP Economics because I enjoyed challenging myself academically. I was successful in my honors classes freshman year, so I had high expectations for AP Economics. Before I knew it, fall came around and I got my first test back in econ. Let's just say I was a little bit more than upset. I had 2 choices before me, drop the class or push through. I chose to stick with the class even though I knew it would lower my GPA and be the lowest grade in my transcript. I'm happy I didn't drop the class because I learned several skills which will help me in college. I learned how to use my textbook as more than a paperweight, as well as how to manage my time effectively. Most importantly, I learned to never give up. I'm currently taking 5 APs as a senior and will be graduating with 10 AP credits. I am proud of what I have achieved in my AP classes and feel prepared for challenging college courses. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name, I'm going to make this a little higher. There we go. My name is Corbinian Warner, and I am also a senior at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I would like to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to take a couple minutes just to share my experience in the advanced placement classes at our high school. Over my high school career, I have completed only 7 AP courses. Each of those classes, however, have been truly phenomenal in their own ways. However, in summation, the advanced placement program and all of these classes within it all have one common effect. They shape and create students who are eager to learn. At the end of my freshman year, I realized that in order to be more successful, I needed to be pushed further. Thankfully, AP courses provided exactly that opportunity. My first AP class was chemistry in my sophomore year. I went into the course being one of 2 sophomore students surrounded by 25 plus upperclassmen. You could say that I was a little intimidated. However, in addition to feeling shy, the course was also difficult. But precisely that is the beauty of the AP curriculum at Fairfield Ludlow High School. The fact that the students are forced into this academically tough environment makes the class become a close-knit environment that together will be extremely successful. Another class I would like to talk to you about is AP United States History. Frankly, I'm a math and science student, so history is not my strongest subject. But, again, I wanted to push myself. So I spoke with the teacher, Miss Moore, to find a strategic approach and find a strategic learning style that would allow me to be successful. However, after talking to her, I realized how AP classes truly spawn fantastic students because Miss Moore didn't show me how to learn. She instead allowed me to provide guidance in finding and discovering my own learning style. This individualistic approach allowed me to not only find my learning style, but also enjoy and do well in the subject. Finally, I would like to talk to you about AP Biology, which truly provided a lasting impact for my future. I went into the AP Biology curriculum knowing what biology was from freshman year. However, I left the class knowing that I loved biology. This class provided guidance for me in order to pursue going into a medical pathway. Because not only I became fascinated as how the human body interacts, I also became fascinated in how it works, how it adapts, and how it responds to stimuli. Before I end, I would like to thank each and every one of the teachers who are involved within the AP curriculum within our school system, and tell them that what they teach not only prepares us for our current life, but also prepares us for the future. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Good night.
Thank you very much.
And now 2 of our teachers, Sarah Bassett and Steve O'Brien, would like to share their perspective with you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a privilege to represent the AP teachers from Ludlow tonight, but I'm even more pleased that tonight we're here to recognize that access to AP classes is not so much a privilege anymore as is an opportunity for students. I think it's probably fitting that I am able to represent Ludlow tonight as I teach AP Government and Politics. And 2 of the central tenets that we address in our class are the power of access and the progress of inclusion, which are 2 really essential elements to student success in AP classes, as well as their development as citizens operating in our world. When I first came to Ludlow, we virtually had no students that were taking the AP exam in government and politics, let alone passing it. But we worked very hard to adjust our instructional strategies to accommodate students with different needs and differentiate for students with disparate backgrounds. And our program has really grown. We've grown from 1 to 2 to even sometimes 3 sections of AP Gov. And all the while, we have not only maintained, but we have increased our scores. And I think right there, the numbers bear out the fact that increased placement in AP does not diminish the advanced in advanced placement. To the contrary, I really believe that the students benefit from this increasingly heterogeneous population because they're exposed to viewpoint diversity. Students get to see firsthand perspectives from other students that walk a different walk of life and lived different ways. And they personalize this experience in a way that resonates much more than reading such situations in secondary sources. You will see Fortune 500 companies such as GE right here in Fairfield, interest groups of retired generals who submit amicus briefs to the Supreme Court advocating for viewpoint diversity in the classroom, precisely because viewpoint diversity helps the students prepare to have a workforce that will represent and appeal to the changing demographics of our country. And while our preparation of our students for the workforce is of the utmost importance, as a teacher I have to also say that one of the best parts of our AP program is a little bit more personal than that and perhaps has a more immediate effect. And that is when you see a student who has just stepped into an AP class for the first time and they're tentative, they're a little bit nervous, they're not sure if they deserve to be there, and then they work a little harder than they've ever worked, and you see them break down these barriers that were either imposed by society or even by self, that sense of accomplishments for what they've earned is like nothing else. And as an example for you, I had a student who leapfrogged from a level 2 class all the way up to AP a couple of years ago. And in the last week of class, the students voted him most likely to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice. So I guess in closing, I want to say that you can see that not only the students are learning and are inspired, but the teachers are too. I have been exposed to viewpoint diversity in learning about a pop artist named McLemore, who I think sums up my point best when he says, "The ceiling can't hold us." Did I get that right, Billy? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Steve O'Brien. I've taught social studies here in Fairfield for 12 years, teaching AP European history for 11 of those 12 years. I'm here to speak to Fairfield Public Schools' recognition as part of the AP District Honored Code. My experiences before and shortly after coming to Fairfield were that a careful vetting process could produce impressive test results on AP exams in May. Typically, to be successful in this process, a student would at least have to secure teacher recommendation, but might also need to complete an AP application that could include writing samples or even an interview with an instructor. Only in rare circumstances would results of this vetting process be overridden. All this was done, it was thought, to maintain the integrity of the curriculum and to protect students from the discouragement of finding themselves academically over their heads. Its results were both intended, small elite classes of students that routinely produce strong work and excellent test scores, and less so, a growing population of disillusioned students who are eager for an AP challenge, but who were unable to secure a spot in an AP class. Several years ago, when the decision was made to relax the vetting process, AP instructors were concerned that scores would dip and that scholarly quality in the classroom would be diluted. Initially, I shared these concerns. What I found instead, though, has been that many of those students who at one time would have been disqualified for lacking in academic preparation are frequently the most hardworking members of the class. Further, their determination to overachieve through diligent effort and enthusiastic interest in the content often motivate the traditional AP population to consider the material from a different perspective and help create overall a stronger classroom dynamic. Such students are an important reminder that an academic challenge can be a healthy thing and that future achievement can't always be accurately predicted by past successes. It's been several years now since the implementation of the AP open enrollment policy, and during that time, achievement on our AP exams has remained on par with those from before. This is an impressive achievement, but in my opinion, the more important aspect of the policy shift has been our having found a way to encourage an ever larger and more diverse group of students to be critically and creatively thinking lifelong learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Finally, I'm very pleased that we have a representative from the College Board with us this evening. Heather Cenopoulos is the Senior Director of Strategic Communications for the AP program. She left her office in Manhattan about 3 hours ago, probably never thinking it would take quite this long to get to Fairfield on the train. But I'm very, very glad she came, and I think that's an indication of how eager she was to share this moment with us. I greatly appreciate Heather's willingness to be here this evening, and she'd like to say a few words before the presentation.
In just one moment, so I can cue up our TV coverage. We won't be recessing the meeting, but we will have a photo opportunity with you at the sign immediately after her presentation, so that you might be ready. Go ahead.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Chairman Dwyer. Superintendent Title, members of the board, and the Fairfield Public Schools community, I am delighted and honored to be here this evening, although a little less delighted with Metro North. The College Board's Advanced Placement Program, as you've heard from these wonderful students and teachers, enables academically prepared and motivated students access to rigorous college-level coursework, but with the support of high school teachers and their peers. In addition to studying the discipline, students build confidence and learn essential time management and study skills that they need for future college and career success. Over the past decade, the number of students who have taken AP courses has increased exponentially, and one would think that by opening access to AP courses, results in overall performance may drop, but that has not been the case. 4 years ago, the College Board decided to acknowledge those schools who are working to increase access to AP courses and simultaneously maintaining strong performance on AP exams. Over the past 3 years, Fairfield Public Schools has increased the number of students taking AP by 6% while maintaining their incredibly high level of performance. 91% of AP students in Fairfield score a 3 or higher when they take an AP exam. This is an amazing achievement. This year, 477 districts are being recognized by the College Board for this great achievement. Fairfield Public Schools is one of those who has made it onto this prestigious list. I applaud the hard work of the district instructional staff, including district leaders, school leaders, and of course the teachers who have spent countless hours in the AP classrooms working with the students, not to mention the students and their incredibly hard work as well. You all truly embody the Fairfield motto of excellence through teamwork. Superintendent Title and Chairman Dwyer, could you join me at the podium? On behalf of President David Coleman and the Board of Trustees of the College Board, it is with my pride and honor that I present this certificate indicating that Fairfield Public Schools has been placed on this year's AP Honor Roll.
Right.
Come over here so that our administrative assistant and chief photographer.
Chief photographer, right.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the trouble with your travel.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Program here.
We hope that your travel back will be a little bit smoother. We will finish the presentations part of the agenda and then move back to the consideration of the bylaws. And so the next presentation is recognition of PTA delegates. Before Mrs. Gerber makes some comments, I'd like to make just a couple of comments. PTAs, not about the delegates, but about PTAs in general, are a focal point of communication from the school community to the Board of Education and from the Board of Education to the school community. We have many constituencies that we need to communicate, but certainly the school community is a big part of it. I was at a workshop up in Cabe and somebody talking about security in schools, and they made the following comment that I found astounding. 20% of the U.S. population is in school every day. Between students and teachers, it is a significant part of the population that depend on our public schools as well as private schools. That does not count universities. And so I thought that was a pretty significant statistics, and PTAs are at the focal point of helping communication between both groups. So I want to thank all PTA leaders past and present, as well as future, because it's an important volunteer effort in this country. Mrs. Gerber.
Okay, I just wanted to recognize the Board of Education representatives for 2013-14, and just thank you for coming to all of our meetings and being able to take what can be very lengthy, dense meetings and be able to bring those, the information that you get from these meetings back to your individual PTAs and be able to report to the PTAs and to your school in general about what goes on here. And you provide a really invaluable service. You're definitely the unsung heroes of the PTA, and it's usually one of the hardest roles to fill on a PTA board, so thank you so much for doing this. And I think probably the best way to do, just because I'm not sure exactly how many of you are here tonight, if you could line up and just introduce yourself and say what school or schools, because I know there are a couple of you who
Line up at the podium.
to just introduce yourself and say where you're from, and that's pretty much it.
And if you don't come up, those of us who know you're in the audience will start calling out your name. So if you would introduce yourself and the school that you represent.
Hi, my name is Annie Rooney Crino, and I'm from Dwight Elementary.
Welcome.
Hi, Melissa Flannery from Stratfield.
Stay there if you would, because I think we're going to take a picture. And the audience ought to see who we have.
Eric Newman, PTA Council.
Leanne Ratner, Fairfield Woods Middle School in North Stratfield.
Nancy Haverly, SEPTA representative. Virginie Morin, Holland Hill Elementary School.
Kelly Dillon, Osborne Hill, and Fairfield Woods Middle School.
Nancy Schutte, Ludlow High School.
Christina Marson, Dwight, Ludlow, and Aquaculture, Bridgeport.
April Klein, Roger Ludlow Middle School.
Beth Ullman, Fairfield Ward High School.
Mandy Barber from Riverfield.
Elizabeth Dillaba from Riverfield.
Welcome. Thank you. If we can get you into 2 rows, then perhaps Jessica and I and anybody that wishes to join me can have a picture, and we will endeavor to get this in the newspaper so people know and recognize your service. Thank you very much. So 8x10 glossies will be, no, sorry. The full list of the Board of Ed delegates are in your packet as enclosure number 1. So we are now returning back to the discussion that we had on bylaws, and Mr. Fattabine was about to
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
commentary and turn it into a
Point of order.
motion. Yes, please.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. The motion at the beginning of the meeting was to move the review of the bylaws up prior to the presentations. There are no amendments on the agenda under new business for the bylaws. The amendments that were brought were not brought by a 2/3 majority vote. So I asked for a point of order that the previous two votes are out of order because they were not on the agenda, they were not brought by two-thirds majority vote, and that they be stricken from the record.
Interesting question. It has been our custom to publish motions that we're going to vote on, and at the beginning of the meeting, when I stated that our custom is to take ideas at this meeting and then post them for official action at the next meeting, was the purpose of that. We also have a bylaw that says that we will endeavor not to act on an item at the same meeting it's brought up, that we should receive it and then act on it at a subsequent meeting. So I'll rule that Mr. Convertito is correct. Now, the ruling can be challenged, and a board member can challenge the ruling, and certainly Mr. Fattabine could do that. So, Mr. Fattabine, you have the floor.
I challenge that ruling on two parts. One, the bylaws specifically indicate that the amendments to the bylaws will be reviewed and permit amendments without prior notice at the organizational meeting. At all other regular meetings, you have to have prior notice of those amendments. The second thing is the point of order is not well taken because it was not done by a two-thirds vote. It was done by a consent of the body, unanimous consent, to move to discuss that item at that time. So by unanimous consent, that was unobjected to, it didn't require a two-thirds vote. And even if it did, it was unanimous.
The review of the bylaws was moved by unanimous consent on the agenda.
It wasn't moved because properly it couldn't be in the, it should have been in the organizational meeting portion of the agenda because that's when the bylaws require the bylaws to be reviewed at the organizational meeting. So it was a motion by unanimous, it was a request by unanimous consent to address the review of the bylaws and the amendments at the organizational meeting. It wasn't necessarily, although it could have been, a request to circumvent the rules that requires a two-thirds vote to move it or take it out of order. But it was by unanimous consent with no objection. So I think it was properly taken and as well as required by the bylaws.
And Chair,
Mr. Fattabine has made his commentary in support of mine. I've mentioned it. I will say that the agenda item does say review of bylaws as opposed to action, and so I guess conceivably you could think of this as an FOI issue as well. But that is my ruling, and so therefore, if board member wishes to object to the ruling, then I would suggest that we put it in the form of a motion to challenge overturn the ruling of the chair, and then act on that as an official motion. Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Yes, I think I would have to, I guess, make that motion that you just said, because I just went to that CABE training, and it says with point of orders that they must be raised at the time the breach occurs. They cannot be made after the breach occurs. It must be made at the time the breach occurs, and if it had been a breach, then he should have mentioned it prior to any voting or discussion.
Mr. Chair, Robert's Rules of Order, Section 23. The only exception to the rule that a point of order must be made at the time of the breach arise in connection with breaches are that of a continuing nature, and we are continuing this, in which a case a point of order can be made at any time during the continuing breach.
You wish to make a motion, so first let me get it seconded, and then that motion is debatable. Is there a second?
What's the motion again, please? Challenge that.
Please, the motion that you wish to make.
I guess it's the motion that it wasn't I don't know, what you just said before, whatever that motion was. You just explained what it was, that we would have to overturn the chair's motion that it was uncalled for. Whatever the right wording is.
Challenge the decision of
There
the
you go.
chair
Challenge the
and
decision
allow
of the chair.
the motions to
stand.
To stand.
Correct.
Is that, I think that's a fair statement of your motion. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Mr. Llewellyn seconds it. Mr. Fattabine's made an argument. Mr. Convertito's made an argument. Are there other arguments to be, and I've made an argument, if you will, so, because I've made the original ruling. Is there a comment from any other board members? Are we ready to
So
act?
clarification, the current motion on the table is to maintain the votes as previously taken?
No. if we're ready to vote, I'll restate
Actually, if we want to know if we have comments, why don't you, could you restate it now, please, so that
in case you
we're all
have
clear?
comments. The motion was to overturn the decision of the chair and allow the votes to be recorded as made. And that was moved and seconded. And so for those who want to maintain the votes as currently we had them while we were discussing, you would vote to approve that motion. If you wanted to say, yes, the Roberts rules that either I've described or Mr. Convertito has described prevail, then you would vote no against the motion, and in which case the votes would not be recorded. Have I explained that to everybody's satisfaction? Mr. Fattabine?
Is it my understanding that the chair's ruling is going to encompass motions that were made and passed by the body under the point of order that the current motion before the body was out of order, or the current motion before the body was not in accordance? I guess I want a clarification as to how far back is the chair going to hold that ruling with respect to the motions that have already been passed and approved by this body, or with respect to only the motion on the floor at this time?
The two that were passed. There is not a motion on the floor at the
So you-
moment. Let me explain. There is no motion on the floor at the moment. You described it, but I asked you not to put the motion on the floor so that we could take the presentations, and we were about to do that when Mr. Convertito raised a point of order, and the purpose of points of order is to ask the chair to make a ruling, which I did.
So the ruling is that the motions passed by this body by vote are now going to be vitiated by the chair's ruling based on Mr. Convertito's argument that they were not properly before the board.
Correct. And those motions will be brought up at the December 10th meeting when action on the bylaws was anticipated.
Point of order, if I may. If Mr. Convertito voted against something that was passed, is he actually allowed to challenge it after that ruling has been, after that vote of the body has been made?
He's allowed to raise a point of order, yes.
Okay.
Any other commentary from people before we vote on this motion?
The motion now is the appeal of the chair's ruling.
Is the appeal of the chair's ruling. We're not debating the bylaws discussion, we're debating the appeal of the board's discussion. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Through the chair to Mr. Convertito, I just want clarification. On page 12 of our bylaws under Article 6 amendments, at the last 3 lines where it says that, well, all of it, the bylaws may be amended by an affirmative vote of the majority of the entire membership of the board, skipping the commas, except that it shall not be necessary to include proposed amendments in the call for an organization meeting when the bylaws are reviewed. How do you read, I'm genuinely looking for clarification here, how do you read this wording in light of what you read about Robert's rules?
I have to let the chair make a ruling on that. You're looking at which line? Line two.
Well, I jumped from the first line to the third line. So it's on page 12, Article 6 amendments. The bylaws may be amended by the affirmative vote of a majority of the entire membership of the board at any regular meeting, provided that a copy of the amendments shall have been included in the call for the meeting, except that it shall not be necessary to include proposed amendments in the call for an organization meeting when the bylaws are reviewed. And so is this a case of in order to know how to vote on the motion, I'm looking for clarification if this would trump Robert's rules?
And again, the purpose of a point of order is that one member may disagree with the ruling of a chair, and so that member says, here's why I disagree, and the chair says, well, here's what was the basis of my decision, and the board gets to say, well, we think, this is the right decision. There is a conflict between the bylaws in one section and another section of the bylaws that says we should endeavor to not try and make a decision in the same meeting that an idea is brought up, and that our custom has been to bring it up in one meeting and vote at the next meeting. The last 2 years, that is exactly how we've done the bylaws, so that all members will have a chance to talk about it. And yes, from time to time, FOI does take exception to action on items that are not properly noticed. So for all of those reasons, I thought that Mr. Convertito's point of order was well taken. It's up to the board to decide which one they're more comfortable with. So, any further commentary? That was your question. You have a
Right.
further
So
commentary.
my comment being that while I actually think this wording, again, obviously judgment call here, that this wording would allow for the motions to have been, I am in general in favor of our receiving any proposed motions ahead of time so that we can think about that we'd have the wording in front of us as well, as opposed to my very scratchy crib notes. So, bless you. So I guess for that reason, I would be voting against the motion in support of Mr. Convertito's point of order, so that a vote would be taken at the December meeting in favor. Right.
Yes. Which does not prevent us from acting on any of Mr. Fatabean's suggestions. It just moves it to another meeting. Are we ready to vote, or one more comment, Mrs.
Yeah, I have one more comment, and I just want to make note that our bylaws specifically allow that vote to have taken place. Therefore, for us to go against our bylaws after a vote has already been taken for two motions, a third one being raised, and then after two events being closed, to then backpedal, given that you have to raise a point of order at the time of breach. So as far as I'm concerned, those first two motions are done. That breach would have had to have been called before any motion had been taken, and it did not occur. So the only one that's in question in my mind is the one that's currently under discussion. And I would further add that at this point, the bylaws specifically say that we can take a vote. Therefore, I would hope that we're not basing our judgment on the chairman's opinion to drive our right under the bylaw.
Mr. Convertito, followed by Mr. Patton.
Mr. Chair, the organizational meeting was closed by you, okay? And then the regular meeting started, okay? At that point in time, the motion was made by Mr. Fatabean to move item C under section 11, new business, up, okay? That point in time, we were in a regular meeting. We were no longer in an organizational meeting, okay? So Article 6 does not apply, okay? The point of order was raised because we are changing a document here at the table, okay, without notice, without the language in front of us, okay, and I think we're voting blindly on things that we shouldn't be doing, okay? The motion and the point of order is valid because it is a continuing discussion and therefore not void, okay, and on a claim of timeliness. Thank you.
Yeah. And that was my ruling. Mr. Patton.
I've kind of flip-flopped on this about 3 times in the last 5 minutes, reviewing everything. Normally, bylaws usually trump Robert's Rules of Order, but in the case of what it does say in Article 4, it's pretty plain as day. You know, I'm not going to read it again, but that it says that you can include, you know, such amendments, you know, in the call for the organizational meeting, which by Mr. Convertito's correctness, I wouldn't even say in my opinion, it's a fact. One meeting was closed, the next was open. It is not in the organizational meeting because this is now the regular meeting and that was closed. So that should go back to Robert's Rules of Order trumping, you know, or rather bylaws trumping Robert's Rules of Order, except in this case, that organizational meeting was closed. So in my opinion, I would agree that the challenge is valid.
Okay, I think people have seemed to be expressing their viewpoints maybe with different words, and so we do have an agenda that we have to move forward on. So are there final comments? And I'll give Mr. Fatabean the last comment since we're talking about his motion.
I have
Mr.
a final
Llewellyn, then
comment.
Mr. Fattabine.
In terms of process, can you close an organizational meeting if you haven't done what's required under an organizational meeting, which is the review of the bylaws? So if you quickly move to close it to go to, your intent, I believe, was to move back to the organizational meeting. So I don't believe it was actually part of the regular meeting, because we skipped something that was required to occur during an organizational meeting. So there would have been a point of order there.
Yeah, I disagree with that, but Mr. Fattabine, last comment.
I also disagree that the organizational meeting was closed. I don't think there was a motion to adjourn the organizational meeting, and I don't think it was closed. I think I made my consent, my request for unanimous consent to add what was required by the bylaws to the organizational meeting was passed. Or not passed, but didn't require it passed because there was no objection. It was by unanimous consent. So I think it was legitimately on the agenda at that time at the organizational meeting that I believe was not adjourned because there was no motion to that effect, and that the bylaws in Article 4 specifically permit amendments to the bylaws to be taken up at the organizational meeting, and that's what's been done in the past. I think it was done according to the Robert's rules as well as according to our bylaws. And I take exception at this effort to use procedure for what apparently be unpopular motions. And I would think I plan to make this motion again, and I may make other motions again in light of the circumstances of this, and I don't understand why it's so unpopular. But for some, there's going through extraordinary circumstances and extraordinary reasons, and circumventing, in my opinion, a legitimate reading of the rules and the decorum of this body to make efforts to try and squash it for whatever reason I can't quite be certain. But I just don't understand what the controversy is, and but there apparently is some, and that always troubles me as this body is going to move forward as what I thought was going to be a body that worked a little better together. But even these simple things become complex for some unknown reason, and it troubles me that that's the direction we're heading in.
As Mr. Fattabine knows, that I happen to vote in favor of one of his amendments and voted against the other. I don't believe I'm showing bias toward the actual concepts. I'm just addressing the issue that Mr. Convertito brought up. If we're ready to act on the motion, I will call and so I will explain the question and then call the question. The motion that is before us is to overturn the ruling of the chair and allow the two amendments to remain as recorded. A vote in favor of that allows the two amendments that have already been passed to be recorded as official. Vote against that motion means that we will will vitiate, using Mr. Fattabine's word, those two motions and consider them at the next regular meeting with other bylaw changes. Any questions on the intent of the motion and the vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mrs. Carnell. By the end of the meeting, I will get that correct. I apologize. Okay, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Llewellyn. All opposed? Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Patton. The motion passes 5-4. The motions remain as recorded action of this board. So now we are back to the action on the bylaws in light of the concern that some board members have of receiving and voting without having something in front of them. Do you wish to pursue the third one, or do you wish to defer it till the next meeting? Your choice.
In the spirit of trying to be collaborative, I'm going to defer any future motions I may have made tonight and for a regular board meeting, which we can bring requests to or motions to amend the bylaws at a regular meeting. So I will defer my other comments and prospective motions tonight.
Thank you. That does not finish this agenda item, though, because anybody that has a concept that they wish to raise so that you're alerting board members that this is an idea you'd like to pursue. You're free to bring it up at this meeting and then submit the actual language to us. And what you will find in the packet for the next meeting is a list of all of the motions that board members have sent in. I will remind you that you can't just send in a concept. You have to actually send in the official wording change that you want to the motion. Are there any other comments that people want to make on the bylaws? And if not, we will, we do. Mrs., you want to defer to Ms. Carnell? Ms. Carnell, and followed by Mrs. Lou McCormick.
In light of being totally confused, I'd like to make a motion on a bylaw.
Yeah, you do
I
have to use the
apologize.
microphone.
Sorry. Do I have to bring this up now or write it in?
We're
I just
bringing
wanna
up ideas, so don't say motion. You just say, I'd like to bring I will be submitting a formal motion on something else and give the subject and what you're trying to accomplish.
I will be submitting a formal motion on, it is Section C on the agenda, page 9.
And the purpose of the motion in just kind of lay language?
Okay. The rationale is in an effort to make sure that board members are able to appropriately participate in the construction and prioritization of the agenda, encouraging the burden of the board be appropriately shared by its members.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Lou McCormick was next.
Should we, I don't know if this is appropriate for me to ask. Is it appropriate for me to describe with some specificity what the amendment motion
I think,
is? Or no?
Yes, but how specific, it's up to you, but
Well,
as
this
long
will-
as you
this
think
could-
that board members understand what you're trying to get accomplished.
I kind of want to read it because it's long.
Please. Oh.
And so there's lots of parts to it, so nobody should be taking notes because eventually I will submit it in writing for you to review. But I want you to understand the gist of it. Okay. So I would like to make a motion to amend the bylaw under Article 4, Methods of Operation. That's under item 8400s. To add an item, I'll number it myself, 8450, because there is no number. I want to add a bylaw.
Okay. For boards, Mrs. Lou McCormick, the bylaws are considered a policy of the board and are in the policy booklet and have their own numbering sequence in the 8,000 range, which does not match the official bylaws that we have been referring to, article this, section that. So Mrs. Lou McCormick is referencing the policy manual's numbering sequence.
Yeah. Section 5. Well, so this is under this. So there, I think it only goes up to 8440 in the 8400s under methods of operation. And I would make a motion to amend that to add in 8450.
You're intending to make a motion
I'm
at the next
intending.
meeting.
That's right,
Yes.
I'm intending. Sorry. And the item name would be short-term goals, objectives, and action plans. And again, please don't take notes because this is long, so I'm going to read this to you. The rationale to add this amendment is created to address the need for accountability and more clearly provide guidance to the board and administration for a process by which to annually set measurable goals, objectives, and action plans to assess its effectiveness at driving improving district performance through its policies, with student achievement always being a priority. That's my rationale. That is not part of it.
Okay.
I'm just explaining.
And
Okay.
I think board members understand the concept. Is there more that you think
Sure.
you need at the moment? You will be able to argue this and present your full case.
I understand, but I
at the
figure, if
December
I
10th
give them
meeting.
some color, then people can go back and it won't be such a long argument
Fair enough.
when we discuss it.
Please
Okay.
continue.
Because you know it will be, given the past 2 hours. Okay. So the first item is the short-term Board of Ed goals, objectives, and action plans shall be in alignment with the Board of Ed mission statement, long-term educational goals, long-term goal, as well as the school district's 5-year strategic plan. The Board of Education shall formulate an annual Board of Education short-term goals, objectives, and action plan, which defines the district's priorities and related action plans for the coming school year, with the objective of moving the district closer to its long-term goal and mission. The short-term goals and objectives shall be approved by the board at the end of the August immediately preceding the relevant school year unless a majority vote is taken to extend the approval to the end of September for that year respectively. The approval date for the 2013-14 school year shall be January 30th, 2014, since we're already into it. The Board of Education short-term goals and objectives shall clearly define the district priorities and action plan for the coming year. Goals shall directly address, but not be limited to, A, student achievement, B, fiscal management, C, Board of Education effectiveness, D, human resources and e-facilities. Under student achievement goal setting, and I provide this given Section 10-220 of Connecticut State Statutes that states that the local boards of education shall develop student objectives which relate directly to the statement of educational goals, which identify specific expectations for students in terms of skills, knowledge, and competence. So under this, item number 1, state and national standardized tests shall be one method of measuring student achievement. I told you it's long. The Board of Education and the superintendent shall cooperatively set specific student achievement goals regarding standardized testing results in each primary measurable academic area to assess student progress for each level of mastery, to include below proficient, proficient goal, and advanced. The levels of mastery performance shall be assessed across the aggregate district and by individual school for subsets of students' populations, including respective special needs student populations, which include ethnicity, gender, ELL, free lunch, talented and gifted students with disabilities, and as well the student population that does not fall into those special needs categories. Progress for both district and individual schools shall be measured against Board of Education short-term goals, DRGA, DRGB, and state and national performance benchmarks. Separate item now. The Board of Education shall work collaboratively with the superintendent to deliver the Board of Education short-term goals and objectives. The Board of Ed shall assess progress towards achieving the stated goals and objectives via district outcomes in December, March, and June. So we want to assess progress towards our objectives, not just set them, but assess progress. And then finally, each goal and objective shall provide for a specific action plan to be accomplished in that year unless otherwise specified. The action plans shall be developed in cooperation with the superintendent and approved at the same time as the short-term goals and objectives. That's it.
Thank you very much. We have 3 that are on the agenda at the moment for the next meeting. Is there anybody on this side of the table that has any other ideas that they're going to bring forward? Anybody on this side of the table? Mr. Fatabean's remaining motions I have as one of the ones that will be coming forward. Yeah, Mr. Llewellyn.
Sure. So,
and if I could ask you to, sorry, but briefly describe the concept so that we can not get
I'm
through all
always
the other
brief.
items.
Okay. So, as a new board member, one of the things we've heard is we should be looking to CABE to help, guide the body. And I think what I'd like to propose is an amendment to our bylaws that would fall in the 8100 category and restore some of the specificity and accountability back to the Board of Education to align more closely with those put forth and recommended by CABE as their kind of best and practices language. So there would be 4 basic responsibilities. The first, we would amend, I guess it falls under 8100B, the board shall amend the first one. So number 1 is select, retain, and evaluate the superintendent of schools who serves as the district's chief executive officer and implements board policy. The second one would be an amendment to item 2 and 4 of the above. Develop, implement, and monitor the district's policies, including short and long-term goals and objectives. These policies serve as the roadmap for the school district. These policies are to give direction to the superintendent and become the foundation for accountability. The third one would be an amendment to 3 above, being building public support and understanding for public education. This means communication and interpreting the school's district's mission to the public, listening to the community, and when appropriate, incorporating citizens' views into the discussions and actions of the board. And the fourth one, which would be amending number 5, develop, approve, and monitor the implementation of the budget, which provides resources for the educational priorities of the school district. And what I'm effectively proposing here is to almost supersede what we've got with those that are with recommended language by CABE, which is a little tighter.
Thank you very much. And again, you'll present that to us so that we can get it copied for the next board meeting.
Correct.
Mr. Fattabine, you had the one idea that you were pursuing before we went to the presentations. Do you have others that you want to alert the board to?
One more, and that was basically to permit 3 board members to request an item be placed on the agenda. And that's basically the gist of it. That's the gist of the concept.
Okay. Any other ideas that people wish to pursue? If not, and certainly if you come up with an idea between now and when the materials have to be mailed out and electronically and all the rest discussion, please get them to us so that the board will have them in front of them. Okay, 9:16. So we are now back to the regularly scheduled program. There we go. Which is back to approval of the minutes. And those are exhibits enclosure number 2 and 3. We'll take them as individual motions. And the first is approval of the minutes of October 22nd, 2013, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 22nd, 2013. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber? Do I have a second? For the purpose of considering the motion. Mr. Dwyer seconds it. Any discussion on those minutes? With no discussion, are we ready for vote? If so, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor. Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, opposed? Abstentions? The 4 new board members, which by Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Cornell, Mr. Llewellyn, and Mr. Patton. By custom, if you're not at a meeting, it's frequent that board members abstain since they weren't at the meeting, and so the motion passes 4-0. Abstentions are not counted as a vote. It's an abstention. Okay, the second motion is for approval of the minutes of November 13th, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of October 13th, 2013. Do I have a motion? November. I'm sorry, my apologies. Mrs. Gerber is motion. Mr. Dwyer seconded. Any discussion on those set of minutes? No discussion. Are we ready for a vote? All in favor, raise your hand. And Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine. Opposed? None. Abstentions? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, I'm doing better, Mr. Llewellyn, and Mr. Patton. So the motion passes 4-0. Abstentions are not counted as a motion. Thank you very much. So, student reports. Now, before I move on to student reports, next month we will be considering the amendments to the bylaws. The bylaws actually state the order of agenda, which places you after presentations, after minutes, and if your studies suggest that you would like to come to the next meeting and suggest that could you move up on the agenda, you would be welcome to propose that, or not. You may enjoy sitting through a portion of the meeting before you speak. I'm glad people chuckled on that. So, who is going to go first?
Just a quick comment, too, about the AP test before. I personally have benefited from the AP tests, and I personally took AP US History, and the AP Gov teacher you saw was my AP Gov teacher, Ms. Bassett. And personally, going into my junior year, I was very skeptical about taking AP US History, but I ended up loving taking the class. It's one of my favorite academic courses. I love even looking it up outside of school. In AP Gov, I personally am very into politics now, and I love watching all the political shows. I love all the interesting things about politics, so AP classes have benefited me in many ways. And just updating on the school activities, over the last month at our school, there have been several significant events, as well as significant achievements. 2 weeks ago, our school was privileged to have Richard Blumenthal visit our school in a cross-town debate versus Fairfield Ward. The issue of and the importance of states' rights was discussed, and after the debate, Senator Blumenthal answered questions posed by students. It was a great event for both schools, and the entire debate was covered on Channel 12 News. If you want to see the debate, it will be covered on Optimum Channel 84 on December 13th at 7 o'clock. During our Spirit Week, we had great participation across the board from our school to see if sorry about that. During our Spirit Week, we had great participation across the board from our senior class, and also tomorrow is alumni day at our school, where many former Fairfield Ludlow Falcons will return to see their former teachers. On Thursday, we are expecting a huge crowd for the annual Turkey Bowl, where we'll be playing Fairfield Ward, and we hope for our team record 7th win of the season for our football team. The Turkey Bowl will conclude our fall sports season, where several teams had success. Our boys soccer team finished with one of their best records in school history at 14-5-1, and our girls volleyball team also finished 19-4. Both fell short of a title, but had very successful seasons nonetheless. And several of our student athletes also received and were recognized with all FCIAC honors to go along with their tremendous team success.
Thank you very much. Our next representative from Ludlow, who is new, so introduce yourself, and you'll be with us for the rest of the year.
Hello, I'm Ethan King, and I'm a representative from Fairfield Ludlow High School. And firstly, I too would like to talk about AP classes. By the time I graduate, I will have taken 4 AP classes, and I just would like to say that they create a very intellectually stimulating environment for the students. And and if I would have to rank my top 5 favorite classes in all of high school, I would have to say that those 4 AP classes are all in the top 5. And a few other items that I would like to mention about our school. Our school drama club is performing the Shakespeare project. And in this project, students will perform scenes from plays such as Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. Additionally, our school Key Club has their biggest event of the year in cooperation with Operation Hope, where each member of the club buys a gift for a child in need for the holidays. Many students in our senior class have also received some of their early decision and early action responses from college, and the remaining decisions are expected to be posted on the week of December 15th. In sum, it was just another excellent month for Fairfield Ludlow High School and several significant accomplishments by our student body. I look forward to reporting to you next month on more events and more positive accomplishments from the student body of Fairfield Ludlow.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Do we have any questions for our representatives from Ludlow? Mrs. Connelly.
I was wondering if you could, I believe you're having an upcoming event sponsored by your lacrosse team, the Sticks for Soldiers event, and I know Ward is contributing to that as well, but I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Or you could defer to the ward representative if they're kind of combining, your choice.
Do you guys? I don't really know.
I know a little bit about it.
Okay, then we'll move on to the ward representatives, and maybe you could start off by answering Mrs. Connelly's question to the best of your knowledge.
I'm Carly Strawn, by the way. I'm a new representative as well. I'm from Fairfield Ward. A bunch of my friends play on the girls lacrosse team, and I know that girls and boys both participate in the Sticks for Soldiers tournament. It's taking place this Saturday I think it's at Ludlow. They do it for soldiers who have returned from Afghanistan and many wars, and they are representing them for the play, and a lot of the donations go towards the soldiers fighting. So that's just an overview of it.
And for those of you who may ignore lawn signs as you drive around Fairfield, there are lawn signs that describe the event as well, so pay attention to that particular lawn sign. Comments on Ward? I'm sorry, Mrs. Connelly wanted to make one clarification.
Just to clarify one point, just for the information of the public, because it is a phenomenal event. It's actually, I believe, going to 2 specific soldiers who actually have suffered life-changing injuries. So it is, in fact, going to them, but it's not just a general pool. It's very specifically going to help them, adapt to their new life based upon their injuries. So it really, I know it gets tremendous participation. So,
thank you for that clarification. Comments on Ward High School, Fairfield Ward High School.
Well, good evening. Happy almost Thanksgiving. There's a couple things going on at Ward currently. Our student body is getting amped up for the annual Thanksgiving Day game, which is going to be held Thursday, 10 o'clock, I believe, right? We look forward to seeing everyone go. It's going to be a huge event. Both our cheerleaders and dance team are choreographing a new halftime presentation where they're going to do a huge dance. So we're looking forward to seeing that. Let's see. we have a bunch of college applications going out, which means we have a bunch of acceptance letters coming in. And some of the people that I just want to just give recognition to, we have Julie Delaney, who's committed to Union College for soccer. Katie Brennan is committed to the University of Richmond for soccer. Michael Foley is going to be playing baseball for URI, University of Rhode Island. And we have Mike and Greg Adams, who are both playing for lacrosse. One is going to Union College and the other at Franklin Marshall. So we're extremely proud of our senior class for getting into those, colleges for sports. We had also participants for the Senator Blumenthal debate. We're proud of them. Carly, you want to take it away?
Sure. Again, I'm Carly. Good evening. Recently at Ward High School, we've had an increase in spirit and school incorporation. During homeroom, we have changed that not every week we have a club to go to. Instead, we have an advisory period. This is how we can incorporate everyone in the school and not leave anyone out. In sports, we put an extra effort into including the underclassmen to make sure that they feel 100% comfortable as well. Excuse my apparel as well. I just came from basketball tryouts, and my coach just hensed on that, so that was one of the big things. As well as sports, we have many people who are looking to go into the arts, but every senior is deep into the college process nonetheless. Tomorrow, alumni as well as Ludlow will be returning to Ward to visit and represent our school to show all of the good points to the underclassmen and what they will be experiencing. They come and talk to the underclassmen and give them all the key points in what to look forward into college and all of the above. But yeah.
Oh, one more thing.
Yep,
Being the president of Student Forum, we are now, we're going to keep you updated, but we're now struggling. Our bagels got shut down. So we're going to keep you updated on that, the school store. And I know we've been working, I've been bringing it up during meetings, but we're now looking for alternatives to fit the food criteria and food codes. So we'll keep you updated on that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Questions for our Fairfield Ward representatives? Mrs. Carnell.
I missed the last thing.
Bagels.
I thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what
sorry.
woke me up. Yeah, no.
Now, you probably already have one person on this board that's favorably disposed to that, because a person who grows up in Brooklyn knows all about bagels.
Please, you can come and see me afterwards.
Any other questions for the student representatives? Go ahead, please finalize.
Actually, recently, speaking of clubs and the advisory period, we have, it's called A week and B week, and we have clubs on 2 different clubs that you can pick to choose from for each week. And I was thinking personally of starting up a new club, either calling it ski club or making it an outdoor adventure club. And what I would love to do is the kids who are unfortunate of not being able to go onto ski team and go to the mountains each week and race, who have a different sport or have some different criteria that they're not allowed to go. I would love to start up a ski club or something. I know recently that the middle school had shut down the ski trip in middle schools. I found that out from Mr. Fry, who's our student forum leader, and I was wondering any details on that, of why it got shut down, and if there's a difference between the middle schoolers and high schoolers, if I could start that up again for high schoolers instead.
The board, unfortunately, is not up on all of the co-curricular or extracurricular activities that occur at the different schools. I do know that as students have an idea and they wish to pursue it, they have met with the school administration and tried to work that out. So your best method is to talk to the school administration and see if there's enough resources and interest to pursue that.
I know it's about liability, but we were wondering if we could do anything with you guys, because I know a lot of people love to ski because it's going to start snowing soon, Christmas.
Yeah.
I think there'd be a lot of participation. So we were just any
Yeah,
feedback.
and again, those kind of details would be worked out with the administration, the headmaster, or the administration at your particular high school.
Okay, so we can keep you updated on
Yep.
that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next agenda item is superintendent's report. No, we have committee reports as well. We have 4 members that, 5, including myself, who are still on committees at the moment. And so, Mrs. Connelly, do you have anything from policy that you wish to bring?
And actually, this is just a word before the students leave, is that we are currently working on the mission and goals for the school district, therefore for the student body. So I would be very interested in your being able to take a look at those as we bring them before the board. We are hopefully getting close to being able to bring that to the board, as well as a wellness policy, and the December 2nd meeting will tell on that one.
And again, if you contact your headmaster, the current version of them have been distributed to the district leadership team, which includes your headmaster. If you have an interest in seeing a copy of it, I'm sure he can make them available to you. You have a question for Mrs. Connelly? No. Mrs. Gerber, do you have anything from your committees?
For Ludlow, for the Ludlow project, the committee approved Arcadis as the project manager, and they've shortlisted 4 companies for construction manager, and they will interview those at their next meeting, which is December 11th, I believe. So that's the latest.
And Mr. Convertito, do you have any comments from yours? Mr. Fatabeen, any comments from any liaison or committee you're on?
Yeah, I guess, real quick, I just wanted to notify the board that I received 6 referrals to the Transportation Safety Advisors, and will be submitting a recommendation to the chairman in short order.
The chairman of the Transportation Safety Advisors.
Chairman of the board, as well as the chairman, as well as the transportation supervisor.
right,
That's
both.
what I usually do, is I
Yeah,
usually
both.
copy you.
Yeah, both. And those are the 4, so let's move on to the superintendent's report.
All right, owing to the hour, I'll be briefer than I intended to be. I enclosed in your packet, it's a bit of a teaser if you haven't seen it, and not sure the new board members have seen it, but I posted on the website some different documents relating to CMT and CAP results, and also AP. You heard a bit about the AP. And because this is basically the last year of the CMT and the CAP, our team has begun to just sort of look at the long arc of the school system and how we've done, what our progress has been. We use this to see where we've been successful, and we dive deeper into it to analyze it, but also if there's areas where we appear to be making less progress, and that's something that the curriculum committees take into account when curriculum comes forward to you. So the really quick overview are the first 2 pages, which are simply the 2 endpoints of the percentage of students at goal, which is the state's major reporting mechanism for these tests. In the first year of its administration, in this current form, 2006, and the final year. It doesn't give you the year-by-year movement between those 2 points, but it's sort of the big overview. It's, there's so much data around CMT and CAP, you can drown in it. So this is the sort of the simplest form of it. And if you look across the years, you'll see that by and large, we've made progress in the percent of students at goal. Our best area in terms of the most growth has actually been math, where the red bars exceed the blue bars pretty well across the board by a fairly sizable margin. Reading, you can see there that 3rd and 4th grade has been relatively flat, but the other grades have been showing gains. CAP shows gains all the way across the board. Writing is one where it's a little more mixed, but something I think that we need to continue to address, and we'll be addressing in our curriculum, although it's at a pretty high level, up in the 80% range. CAP writing has gone up significantly. CAP began in 2007, this generation. And science, and grade 8's an aberration because, as I'll show you on another page, the last year the science happened to be an aberrant dip. All the other years were actually pretty good. So this is one where looking at just the endpoints can be a little misleading, but you can see there the gains in grades 5 and 10. Then there are 2 sets of slides, so they're on the website, and these are just a little sample. So we've taken all 24 subject grade combinations and shown the year-by-year scores from 2006 to 2013. I've also put the state and DRG averages on there for our DRG, which is B. And this is just a few samples. So the first one shows all of them, shows them at percent at or above goal. So I just showed the two endpoints previously, so CMT grade 5 math in 2006 was 74.2%. I showed you the endpoint of 89.7. You can see there what the pattern has been over the intervening years. Third grade reading, again, you can see the pattern there. And then eighth grade science, I wanted to point that out because you can see that, in fact, that had been in the 82, 83, 84 range until 2013. So that the last year does seem to be an aberration. This test actually will be continued to be given. CMT in grades 5, 8, and capped science grade 10 will continue for another year, even though the rest of the tests are basically being discontinued. And then the other way to look at scores is not just looking at percentage goal over time, because that doesn't capture the full breadth of maybe everybody. And so there's another report on the website, another 24 charts that show the average scale score over the years. And I've put horizontal lines in there in red to demark where goal level is and where advanced level is. And so this takes into account everybody's score. The problem is most people don't understand what average scale score is, and it's kind of hard to interpret. It's a bit like the SATs. They take the raw score and they convert it to a scaled score. But this is probably the sort of the best read on overall achievement. And the interesting thing here is that, well, you noticed in grade 3 reading that it appeared we had, by the measurement of percentage goal, it looked like we hadn't made a lot of progress. When you look at average scale score, we have made a lot of progress. So sometimes you learn different things, different ways of looking at the data. So what that means is that students are improving in grade 3 reading. They're just not moving up over the goal line. They may already over goal and moving up to advanced, or they might be at below basic and moving to basic. Average scale score accounts for all movement. So grade 3 reading tells a little different story, a little more positive story than the percentage goal does. And you can see that the average student is somewhere between goal and advanced in third grade reading. And fifth grade math, I put this in here because this shows in 2013, we actually, and this is the third year in a row, but this time it was substantially, the average student in the school district in grade 5 math achieves at the advanced level or above. Actually, it's 5, almost 6 scale score points above advanced in the school district. So that's, and again, all of those charts with all of the average scale scores are available on the website. And then the last page that's in here is the AP, the 10-year AP. And again, I also tell you that, the success in AP is not simply a function of high school teaching. Were it not for strong teaching in the elementary and middle schools and early part of high school, kids would not be able to be as successful in AP as they are. But over 10 years, AP enrollment has gone from 671 students to 1,283 students. The number of tests taken has gone from 290, the number of tests taken has gone from 671 to 1,283, and the number of scores at 3 or above has gone from 504 to 1,038. So we've basically, as you heard earlier, despite the fact that we have lots and lots more kids taking it, taking AP tests, these scores are still quite high. So that's the long arc of the AP enrollment. The actual award was for the last 3 years, as you heard from Heather. So I'm giving this to you in part to alert you to the other part where the complete results are, but also because since I did this at a PTA council meeting and you might hear about it, I should at least give you the same document that I gave to them. So that's that. We will be coming, there will be all new tests and all new jargon to learn as the state transitions to the SBAC. So this is really almost it's a legacy test, but we still learn from it, we still work with it, we still use it to celebrate successes and look for areas to improve.
And you have an update on the food services RFP?
Yes. The board voted to outsource the food services program. Doreen Munsell has been working feverishly on this. It's a multi-stage process. First, we develop an RFP based on the state model. Then we send the RFP to the town, because the town controls all of our bidding and purchasing. That has been accomplished. We've sent it to the town. The town has okayed it, made their modifications for their purpose, and just sent it back to us. We will now send it to the state, who will review it. Once the state reviews it and approves it, then it comes back to us. Then it goes out for procurement for a period of no less than 60 days. So we are moving along on this, but realistically, the switchover of this is going to happen in the next school year. There was some thought back in the fall when the board really voted on this that it might occur at some point during the year. That is definitely off the table because the state has their hands in this thing, and that will just slow it down. So we are moving ahead with this. It's going to happen, and we are actively pursuing the process. And so at some point, I would expect this to be on the street, no later than January. Bids back in March, awarded in April, so we're ready to go for the next school year. That's how it looks right now. So we're moving along on it, and it was something of interest to the board.
Thank you very much. On to item number 9, number 10, old business. Yes, please do. I didn't see any hands, so I...
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Dr. Taylor, are we going to have an opportunity to see that RFP before it goes out?
You can. I think we'll be...
What's policy? I mean, do we normally?
It usually goes to the town.
It can be distributed to the board, but we voted to do it, and now the purchasing decision is in the hands of the district and the town and the State Board of Education, who has to approve the RFP. It doesn't come back to this board for further action.
Can you
We certainly
clarify?
can share it with you.
You'll be getting
When
it.
you say they approve, the state approves what? The
RFP.
format of the RFP, but not the final bids?
The state approves the RFP,
Okay, and who approves the bids?
the purchasing department of the town.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, and then in terms of an update on the food service, I know the last several meetings, there's been requests for information related to the finances. Have we got a budget for that or some actuals that we could see through latest quarter, which would be, I guess, September, or even more current than that? I think that was not in the minutes. I think that was not reflected in the last set of minutes, that there was a request for food service numbers, if memory serves me correctly.
The food service budget has normally been reviewed once a year, which has been our practice. The board has not voted to change that practice. Number two, while the question has been raised for the public's benefit as to whether any transfers have been made from the food services account, which is a separate account, separate from the operations budget, so that we could, quote, cover deficits. The food services budget has an ongoing operating balance, so deficits from that are being covered out of that balance. Board members who have been around for a while know that that balance has been whittled from about $1 million down to 600, 500,000. That's not an exact number, but so there have been no transfers. If a transfer is needed, then that would come before this board, and we normally deal with transfers at year end when all of the transfers are needed, and we act on them at year end.
Okay, and in comment to the budget, if we look at last year's budget book, which I have in front of me, it actually doesn't have the budget for food service. It's got the budget for the year prior. So I don't know if I saw last year's budget, which would be for the current year.
It's done in June, the budget for the food services. It'd be in the June Board of Ed meeting.
So it's not in our book?
Correct. It's
Okay.
not done in, right,
Yeah.
because it's separate off the, it's not part of the operating budget of the school system. So we can get you the budget for the schools, for the lunch program is done in June.
Okay.
So we can get that
We can
out.
get you a copy of
And
that.
can we also get a copy of the most recent financials? Trial balances as of some point in time?
Yeah, we would do that normally in a quarterly update, so January meeting would give us time to do that.
So does that mean they exist from the prior quarterly meeting? The prior quarterly update, which was done when?
We have, the board, by past practice, has not normally reviewed that separate budget on a quarterly basis. We have normally reviewed our operating budget on a quarterly basis. If the board wanted to, by action, say, no, we want to start including that in our quarterly report, well, then we could discuss that and decide whether to do that or not. But at the
Okay.
moment, that has not been our practice.
Okay, I don't think I have an answer, though, to the question. What are the most recent financials that you could share, please?
The most recent financial will be the one that we would produce for the end of the quarter, December.
That's the next,
I
most
think if
recent.
you have specific information that you want, you're free to ask Dr. Title or Mrs. Marcel, the finance
Okay.
director.
I'll follow up. Thank
If you
you.
have a document that you wish. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Then we'll move on to old business, which is approval of the recommendations from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report. And the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the recommendations from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report as enclosed. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Connelly moved. Mrs. Gerber, second. While Mrs. Maxon Connelly made the motion, out of courtesy to Mrs. Gerber, who led the committee, I'll ask her to go first. As board members know, this is an item that completes the work on the 5 goals that we established last year. And there was some discussion regarding the full report, including both conceptual recommendations as well as specific recommendations, and talked about accepting as opposed to approving. And so this is whittled down to the 6 specific recommendations that the committee brought forward. Mrs. Gerber, you want to describe anything?
Okay, well, just to backtrack a little, over a year ago, the board at the time voted on 5 goals for the board to implement. One of those goals, which was unanimously approved by all 9 members of the board, was to set up an ad hoc communications committee to look into ways to improve Board of Ed communications with the other town bodies, with the PTAs, and with the general public. So a committee was formed. It was myself, Mr. Dwyer, and Mr. Liu. We started meeting in November of 2012 and met once a month. We updated the full board in December, February, and May. We made a draft final presentation in June. And then we did not meet, the full board did not meet in July. In August, at our next meeting, we presented our final report to the board with our suggestions, and the motion was asking the board to accept the recommendations of the Communications Committee. One of the members was not there, so there were 8 members. The motion had a 4-4 vote, and so when it's a tie, it doesn't pass. I will say that I think some of the members had concern with the word accept over the word adopt. So in any event, once the committee had issued its final report, it was considered disbanded. So the work that we had done and the ideas we'd come up with were kind of in limbo. So the thought is to bring forward these ideas here, numbers 1 through 6, as very specific ideas that we, as a committee, had discussed, that we presented to the board through our updates and through our final report. And so our hope is that you will be amenable to adopting these, and so we can move forward as a board to get all of these implemented. So I don't want to go through them all. You've had this in your packet. If you have any specific questions about any one of these, I'm happy to address them or give more specific information. So that's kind of where things are right now.
Mrs. Connelly, you made the motion.
One, I recall the objection to some of these as being vague. I still don't recall if there was a specific one noted in that regard, but I made this motion because I think that they are specific. I think that as 9 people up here who have, I'm sure at some point in the course of campaigning, mentioned transparency, accountability, and the need for better communication, I don't understand how any of these would be objectionable in terms of bringing forward to the public the work that our district does, and open ourselves up to be more transparent in terms of what we are doing, and to hold ourselves accountable to the public by communicating further with them. So in that regard, I very enthusiastically will be voting for this.
Mr. Convertito and Mr. Fattabine, I think you were part of the conversation at the last meeting. Do either one of you want to make a comment?
I can make a comment. As before, I'd be reluctant to vote in mass all the items at one time and to approve the whole recommendation so the whole report is adopted as an act of the board. I think debate can be made with respect to all, each one of these 6 items. For instance, item number 4, student recognition, at each board meeting and adult recognition at board meetings. Now, I think in general that is sort of part of the agenda in a sense, so I wouldn't want to try and necessarily dictate the agenda that the chair sets. I would leave it at the discretion of the chair to set the agenda as they choose at the time and not necessarily make it a requirement of the chair to do it. I think it sort of circumvents some of the responsibility or duties of the chair and takes things out of his hands. So I don't think those are necessarily appropriate for the board to act as a whole. I also question the need at each board meeting to do student recognitions. We have a lot of students that deserve recognition, certainly, but we also have a board that's fairly busy and is short in time in many instances. And to devote each meeting to a period of time to offer student recognition, while in theory is good, in practice may be complicated, as well as if you give too many recognitions out, they sort of lose their importance, and it may become something that's thought of as just sort of not that important anymore if you give it off too much, is my thought. So I don't necessarily like that aspect of it. But the whole point being is that I think each one of these may offer some debate as to whether they should be adopted on whole. I think it's sort of shortchanging the discussion to adopt the whole report in this format. And but some of them I certainly think are good. I think the quarterly update memos, I mean, those are good. It's just another burden to write, but I think that update would be helpful to the community and good. To keep in contact with individual PTAs certainly is very good. I think that to a certain extent we do that already. To a certain extent they can be, it's good practice. Do you want to mandate that practice? I'm not certain of that. Board of Ed bios can be put on the website. That's not a big deal. Town meetings, I think, are good practice as well. That's not necessarily too controversial, other than it's another duty that the board has to have among its other duties, and it becomes, if you pile too much on the board, it becomes difficult. So my biggest objection probably is the student recognition, adult recognitions. I just think that should be more discretion of the chair and not necessarily mandated.
Okay. Mr. Convertito? You may not have a comment, but since you were part of the discussion, out of courtesy, I would go to you next.
I think we discussed this previously. I understand Mr. Fadabean's point on 4 and 5. If we, I don't know that adopting the recommendations, I mean, this is their report, this is their recommendation, so my question is, does that mandate the board to do that, or do we want to adopt it with the proviso that the board will, adopt each individual measure? I don't know how you want to handle that. I don't know if adopting means we will do all of this, or it simply says we accept the report.
We had the comment about acceptance.
I know this is a circular. We had this
Right.
discussion, over the summer.
I think the intent is to implement each one of these. If we find in the process of implementing them that there is a problem with it, then we would come back to the board and say, here's where we are, and further discussion. But the intent is to approve these 6 recommendations and have the officers implement them as they're discussed and stated.
If Mr. Fadabean wants to move to divide the question on those 6, I'd be more than happy to do 1 through 3 and 6, and then, have discussion on 4 and 5. If we want to move those to be at the discretion of the chair, I have no objection to that as well.
Other comments, and then, Mr. Fadabean, you may want to think whether you want to divide the question with the way that Mr. Convertito stated it, that 1, 2, 3, and 6 are acted on as a motion, and then 4 and 5 are separated. Give thought to that while I go to Mr. Llewellyn.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest if we could just move to divide, we could knock them off one by one much more quickly than debating language across a broad
Any
spectrum.
other comments from the board?
Sorry, I didn't hear John.
I think John was suggesting also to divide, and whether we divided and voted on all 6 motions individually, or whether we say that the 2 that are Mr. Fadabean's concern, we'll separate those 2 out. And I would leave to Mr. Fadabean, who brought this up originally, whether to ask to divide each one or to divide it the way that Mr. Convertito suggested. Mr. Fattabine?
I'm certainly amenable to dividing the question, but I may introduce another little twist to that motion. And that is, what I was thinking of possibly doing is amending the motion, and I get a feel for that, is to have the implementation of items 1, 2, 3, and 6 at the discretion of the chair. So it may not be mandated, but the chair can decide whether the time that the board has permits those activities or not those activities. So it's sort of at the discretion of the chair. So that would be an amended motion. And then I was going to suggest possibly having items 4 and 5, which are the agenda-type items, to be determined at the time of establishing the agenda. So that leaves the flexibility within the chair to add those items or not at the time of establishing an agenda. I'm just hesitant to, in essence, adopt in whole without any discretion as an act of the board. In other words, I still think it requires some discretion, in a sense, and not mandate and bind the hands of the chairman to have to, and as well as the board, to do this. They need some flexibility. So that's my thought and concern. So I would,
So perhaps I could restate the friendly amendment to the motion to help Mr. Fattabine out, that the Board of Education approve recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 6 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report, and have them implemented at the discretion of the chair. Does that sound what your intent is?
I think that provides some flexibility, I think, which would be desirable for the board as a whole.
Any board member object to that as a friendly amendment?
You're saying
Ms. Cornell?
You're saying 4 and 5
Will be acted on separately.
We can,
Yes, please, speak into the mic.
we can, that will be voted on independently.
That'll be voted on independently, yes. If there are no questions, the motion before you is that the Board of Education approve recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 6 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report, and that they be implemented at the discretion of the chair. Is everybody understanding the motion as presented?
Actually, I'm sorry, are we voting to divide the two of them, or are we voting to
We're
approve
dividing,
it?
we're dividing and only voting on 1, 2, 3, and 6.
Okay.
And items number 4 and 5 will be treated separately.
So if we have comments, any one of those individuals would speak now.
As a point of order,
I thought we were
At the moment, we're
dividing.
talking about dividing the question,
Not
and then
vote
once
to
we
approve.
divide the question, then we could talk about each of those items. Point of order.
just procedurally, can maybe the procedure, just to make it clear to the people, just divide the question, and then I'll reintroduce the amendment with those divided elements. So divide the question for 1, 2, 3, and 6. and
Want
then-
each item acted on individually.
No, my point is to divide the question to group items 1, 2, 3, and 6 together, and items 4 and 5 together. And then once that is determined, make my motion, or make my official motion to then amend the motion for that question that's been divided, 1, 2, 3, and
Okay.
6, to implement the, as was recited before. It just sort of puts it in
Yep.
two things. Instead of having two elements
absolutely.
in one motion, you have the same elements in two different motions, just to make clarification for the members.
So for
Through the
Mr.
chair- through the
Fattabine's
chair,
clarification,
We'll
we'll end up with...
Motion to divide the question
Yeah.
into items 1, 2, 3,
And
and 6, to be taken separately from items 4 and 5.
And 4 and 5 will be taken as a combined motion, correct? Any other clarification that is needed on that division of the question? Mrs. Kennelly, Maxine Kennelly makes the second. Any further debate on that? So on the motion to divide the question into 2, 1, 2, 3, and 6, and then a separate one on 4 and 5, all in favor, raise your hand. It is unanimous. The motion that is now on the floor is that the Board of Education approve the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 6 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report, and that they be implemented at the discretion of the chair. That's been properly
That's
moved
the amended.
and seconded as amended. That's the amendment.
That's the amendment.
That's the amendment.
So you got to vote on the amendment.
That's the amendment. We have to first vote on the amendment and then vote on the main motion.
Is that a question?
Yes. Okay. So the amendment is adding the, and implemented at the discretion of the chair phrase and
Point
restricting
of
this to
order.
1, 2, 3,
There's
and
no
6.
amendment. We've moved to divide the question now. Now we're
Yes.
going to move. Now there will be a motion now.
To
I make the
amend-
motion that the Board of Education approve recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 6 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report to be implemented at the discretion of the chair.
That's the motion. Correct.
Motion amending the main motion, the divided main motion.
So that is the motion that we're acting on to approve that motion, items 1, 2, 3, and 6. Any further clarification needed by members? All in favor?
Wait,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure where we are, so this is my question.
We have divided the question, and we are going to act on a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, and 6. And once we finish that, Mr. Fattabine will put forth another motion regarding 4 and 5.
Sure he will, but wait a second. 1, 2, 3, and 6, if I understand. The amendment of his motion was to add the part of being ad hoc at your discretion?
Which was the phrase Mr. Convertito used, which we've said is, and implemented at the discretion of the chair.
Can I have some understanding of what that means? Let's just pick number 2. Because we're voting on 1, 2, 3, and 6, correct?
Right.
My comment earlier was that it would be my intent to implement 1, 2, 3, and 6 as they're stated there. And I think the purpose of Mr. Fattabine's motion is that should one or any of them not be practical for some reason, or that we have to skip a month because Mrs. Gerber is otherwise detained, that there's some flexibility to implement these things as we move forward. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that, in other words, we're in essence giving the chairman the authority to, at his discretion, implement items 1, 2, 3, and 6, which relate to, just for the public's concern, contact the individual school PTAs for an offer, a Board of Ed member to speak there or do something there, attend there, quarterly meeting updates, which are just a memo indicating what the board has been up to every quarter. I guess we distribute that to various bodies and political individuals. Hold a town meeting at some point in time on some Saturday morning, and or request that Board of Ed members' bios be placed on the website. Those are just the items.
Does that answer your question?
That's fine.
That's fine, okay. Mr. Patton, you have a comment?
More point of order. So are we not, this is it's the new member thing, you just got to have excuses for this. Are we not now voting on the amendment to change what Mr. Convertito had said from the existing motion to, at the, to changing it to allow these 4 items at the discretion of the chair? And then do we not, after that, if the motion passes, then vote on those 4 items? So you actually have 2 motions, and you're trying to make them into one?
I guess I could say that Robert's Rules is intended to help facilitate efficient meetings, not to tie the board up. I'm serious about this. And so, yes, Mr. Patton is correct that perhaps we should vote on whether to divide the question or not, then vote on the amendment, and then vote on the main motion. I will say that I've moved it forward directly to the main motion because I think the interest of the board is to respect Mr. Fattabine's interest to separate the 4 from the 2, and that we are ready to act on the 4 versus the 2, and that we ought to just move forward so that we can get the rest of our agenda items. So I don't dispute, but I'm trying to balance that with moving
The recommended motion was never made, okay? There was a motion to divide the question. So therefore, my motion is not an amendment, it is an actual motion. The recommended motion was never made by anyone or
Well,
seconded?
No, it was.
Okay.
It was, actually. Remember, all items that are on the agenda, before we start discussion, we introduce as a motion, and I think Mrs. Cannelli moved it and Mrs. Gerber seconded it. So therefore, that motion was on the table.
But then the motion was to divide the question.
Yeah,
Which
is
passed.
legitimate, yeah.
So therefore, the superior motion dies because we've now divided the question. And then the motion was made to approve 1, 2, 3, and 6 to be implemented at the discretion of the chair.
Mhm.
It's not an amendment.
which
it's
is where we are
It's
now.
a subsidiary motion to be voted on.
Yeah, which is where we are, and so let's, in the effort of moving this along, vote on that as a main motion, as it has been stated several times, but I'll repeat it unless there are other conversations that people have. If not, can I move on or not?
For a final vote, I have a comment before voting, but if you want to go
Before a
first, go
final
for it.
vote on any one of those 4 items, make a final
Okay.
comment.
I guess my comment has to do with the quarterly updates. And the quarterly updates, I think, get back to what Mr. Fadbean was discussing before, which is how information is going to be reflected. I think if a quarterly update was going to be providing in one location the minutes out to the PTAs, that would be very beneficial. I think if we start overlaying comments and commentary, you're going to introduce a bias to, or potentially introduce a bias out to the PTAs, which are an independent body subject to their own charter, and I don't think are supposed to be lobbied. Therefore, we could be running them afoul of their 501c3 rating. So I would suggest that we either amend this to be providing out the minutes with no commentary, or eliminate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Weren't we supposed to have this provided for everyone?
Mrs. Gerber does remind me that she has put one together so board members might see what one would look like. So let me have her pass that out at the moment. The reason I was looking at you is the same thing happened with Mr. Fadbean 6 months ago or so. He made a comment that said, I think we might want to consider, or something like that, and I did not read that as he's making a firm motion. So
I'm making
so
a firm
trying
motion to amend the language.
Understand exactly what your motion is. Your amendment.
My amendment to the main motion is to either change the language such that...
No, but you have to be
Okay.
specific if you could.
Send memos out to PTAs and other town bodies regarding the, sorry, let me back up. Provide copies of minutes to the PTAs and other town bodies regarding BOE meetings, full stop. These meetings, these memos can go out in April, July, October, and December, full stop.
Provide copies of the minutes to PTA, which happens already, I think.
Correct.
And these will go out in April, July, October, and December,
Yes.
and strike everything else. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Lou McCormick. Any comment on that?
I guess my understanding of the intent of the motion would be then to keep the memos to strictly factual actions the board has taken, and not as a effort to influence the PTAs.
That's correct.
Which, in my understanding, it could be considered improper. Which I think is an interesting and valid point. I think was the intent in the language used in the original motion where it says topics and quick recap to certainly stick with just factual content of actions of the board?
If you look at the sample that was handed out, that expresses the intent.
I can't read that right now, but.
Yeah, Mrs. Gerber.
Maybe I can help clarify. I'm sorry, I thought that this was going to be in your packets. The thought was when Mr. Liu and Mr. Dwyer and I went and visited all the different PTAs when we were on the communications subcommittee, is that we did get a lot of feedback saying that the minutes are too long and that it's too difficult to plow through all of them to try to find information. So that's kind of where we came up with the idea of the quarterly memo, in that all this is, I mean, basically when I put this together, I just went through the minutes and pretty much just pulled out any voting items and any discussion items or presentations. So John Turan came and did the food presentation. I included that. And then just basically going through factual, no opinion, simply providing a very brief snapshot of what took place at the four meetings in January. We met once in February, once in March, and then at the end, I just thought, again, it's helpful because, you know, we're not the only town body that deals with school issues, to simply provide information for the public as to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM, when they received any presentations or took any votes regarding school issues, and then just to provide links. So this is really just supposed to be taking 4 months of minutes, and that could be anywhere from 20 to 50 pages, and distilling it down to 2 pages so that anyone who reads this would say, oh, I didn't know about this, I'm going to go look up the minutes and read them. So this was just a way for, from the feedback we got from PTAs, saying that they couldn't get through the minutes, to give them a chance to see what we were doing, and should they want to learn more, they could go to the links that we provide at the end, they could watch Fair TV, or they could go to the minutes and read them. So that was the intention of doing this short 2-page memo.
And the quarterly update memo's recommendation says that the board secretary shall author, and the chair and the vice chair will review prior to distribution. So I think there is a provision in here to make sure that they are factually based, since the 3 officers would all look at it before it was distributed. I think Mrs. Lou McCormick had a comment, and then Mr. Llewellyn.
Just quickly, would it be clearer for the board, or would people get more comfortable if we specifically cited what items you would post? So, for example, you might say that we would include the votes, motions outstanding, speakers who attended, and we can specifically cite certain items.
And I guess my thought is along the same way. I think the communication concept is fantastic. I think what might actually be more effective would be an index. So you could provide a quarterly index which would state on page 3 of the minutes are the following items. Because what I see here is I see a blurb of, you know, this side of, let me just hold it up. I see this much for February. You know, who's to say that something's more important than something else and is excluded? I think an index would be a really useful tool for everyone, because then they could actually go back to the minutes and see what was actually stated as opposed to an interpretation of a statement.
Okay, so we currently have an amendment motion on the floor, which is Mr. Llewellyn's comment about providing the quarterly memo with copies of the minutes, and, right?
And if I may amend that, just add an index.
Well, you can't officially amend
Okay.
amendment, no.
We're unfriendly.
So if you would restate your motion for the benefit of the board.
May I add the index, or do I not add the index? You want me to restate it?
Is there any objection to a friendly amendment to his statement? So please go forward.
Okay. Provide an index provide a quarterly index out to the PTAs and other town bodies referencing the BOE meetings and topics. These memos will go out in April, July, October, and December.
And is there any question on that motion to amend to essentially replace the current wording with what Mr. Llewellyn just stated? Yes. Mr. Patton.
Speaking as someone who's been on the other side of the table for many years on the PTA side, what some other members have said is absolutely correct, or what Mrs. Gerber said, and that's they don't have time. Parents in general don't have time. They've stated it a million times. I've heard it at meetings. I've attended meetings at other PTAs. They don't have time to read the PTA minutes from the previous meetings. So to read the Board of Ed minutes, they've asked for summaries. They've asked for information, and that's kind of what the Board of Ed reps, who were all here before and hopefully many are still with us here, sitting through all this, they've got to go back and give summaries. What I'd like to see, instead of stating an index or minutes, is instead of saying memos, I'd like to actually change the word to summaries instead of memos. I think we can give them the minutes. I think if we can find the time to do some kind of index, that's great. But I think for all practical purposes, the point of the communication is for quick information with the general bullet points of what's going on the Board of Ed and the central office sides, to give the public and the parents pieces of information that they might not have.
Yeah, I'm prepared to actually vote against the amendment only because I do think items 1 through 6 are adequately presented. I think the addition of the phrase discretion of the chair allows some flexibility, and I think at some point the board has to trust the officers that have been elected, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, to act in a neutral best interest of the Board of Education. Last comments, Mr. Convertito?
Yeah, I have no issue with the amendment to, the move to divide the question and the amendment to put it at the chair's discretion. Typically, this board does not rewrite committee reports and recommendations. These are their recommendations. Either we accept them or we don't accept them. If you don't want to accept 2, then send it out or send it back to a new committee and reform it. But don't try and second guess what they spent 6 or 8 months doing and compiling information and talking to people on, because you do the committee a disservice. Okay? So if you don't want to put in number 2, that's fine. If you want to submit summary instead of memos, it's a synonym. Fine, I get that. That's not a problem. But to rewrite the wording of a committee's report and their recommendations does the committee a disservice. I would not support any of those amendments.
So thank you. At the moment, the motion on the table is to adopt the amendment to item number 2, which was put forth by Mr. Llewellyn. Final comments on the amendment and the amendment only. Which item is related to item number 2? Mr. Fattabine. Is that the last comment, so I can kind of judge where we are? Thank you.
Procedurally, I just want to figure out where we are. So the main motion now incorporates the language that I had initially
Yes.
added.
Yes.
So that's the main motion.
That's the main motion.
All right. If that's the holding of the
And
chair,
it was-
that's all
and then it was amended,
First motion.
and then it was amended for item number 2 per Mr. Llewellyn's
Right.
comment.
Could I get a clarification maybe as to what that amendment is?
Mr. Llewellyn, if you could restate it once again. And I promise that we won't take the recording and show that perhaps you used a slightly different word.
I can guarantee I will, since I didn't write it down. Can't write and talk at the same time. The amendment is to provide indexes to the PTAs and other town bodies referencing the BOE meetings and topics. Full stop. These indexes will go out in April, July, October, and December. Full stop. How'd I do?
I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
The only sentence that survives is these memos will go out in, which Mr. Llewellyn commented, the board secretary will author and the chair and vice chair will review. Remains. Since you didn't state it, I'm clarifying.
It's an index, so I don't know if it's necessary.
So, but presumably the secretary will
I don't object to
produce.
it. If it's an index, I don't object to the authoring and the approving.
Okay, so that sentence will remain in, and so it's the first sentence that is replaced.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. No further clarification or debate. Are we ready to act on the amendment and the amendment only, which is to change the language in item number 2 as just described by Mr. Llewellyn? And again, I like all 6, so I've already stated my position. If we're all ready to act, all in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed? Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Connelly, Mr. Patton, and Mr. Dwyer. The motion fails 4-5. We're back to the main motion, which is including all of the items 1, 2, 3, and 6 as currently worded, and that the main motion is that the Board of Education approve the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 6 from the Ad Hoc Communications Committee report, and that they be implemented at the discretion of the chair. Any clarification needed of where we are at the moment? Having none, are we ready to vote? All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Ms. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton. All opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Llewellyn. The motion passes 7-2. Mr. Fattabine, do you want to put the same motion forward but highlighting number 4 and 5? Is that your intent?
I think maybe, so the main motion now is just the,
We voted to divide the question, and we acted on the first motion, so we need to now put the second part of the motion that's been divided on the table.
so I'm just trying to clarify the preamble wording to that main motion now.
So let me state this and see if I've stated what it is your intent. That the preamble would be that the Board of Education approve the recommendations 4 and 5 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report, and that they be implemented at the discretion of the chair, and that would be the motion, and then we would second it, and then people would debate 4 and 5.
Right, but that would,
Is that your intent?
that would
What you're
not,
trying
that
to
would probably
accomplish?
not be my intent at this, my intent was to make items 1, 2, 3, and 6 at the discretion of the chair. My initial comments when I prefaced this in the beginning was that I thought that items 4 and 5 were more of a situation of an agenda item that is always at the
So
discretion.
you don't
of
wish to make the
chair.
motion. Mrs. Kennelly?
I'd like to make that motion. I do have 3 words that I have a question about, so do I do that as a friendly amendment to my own motion
Well,
after I make
Tell me
it?
what the 3 words are. Let's move this along.
For number
huh?
4, take out the word "each" in front of BOE meeting on the first line. And under number 5, working in the at the very end of it, Fairfield Public Schools for 25 years or more. So 2 words, 1 word striking out of the first line for number 4, and for number 5, the addition of 25 years or more.
So make that as a motion.
Is that an amendment? A motion to amend that main motion now. So now we're discussing.
I think my,
So the motion on the table would be,
Yeah.
if I
Let
could
me
do that.
explain.
Okay.
There is no motion on the floor.
Oh, there's not.
There's no motion on the floor. We divided the question. There's no motion on the floor. Mrs. Kennelly is about to make the motion, and she is going to, she's alerted board members that she's redacted 1 word from it and added 2, and that will be the main motion. And we're trying to move the meeting along.
I got to talk about the B.
Mm-hmm.
Got to jump in on
Number,
that. 25 or more,
yeah, right.
That's a problem. Just need to alert you.
Okay, so how about if we just take away the word "each" and then let Dr. Title comment about the "or more," and then we can decide whether you want to add it or not, okay? Out of courtesy to Dr. Title. So the motion, if I believe Mrs. Maxon Kennelly wishes to make, that the Board of Education approve the recommendations number 4 and 5 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report and implement it at the discretion of the chair, and that number 4 will remove the word at the first line, each, so that it says recognition to BOE meeting. Meetings, yeah. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly has moved it. Do we have a second? Mrs. Gerber. Discussion on the motion. Let me ask Dr. Title what the 2 simple words "or more"
Right.
have an impact of.
The practice has been that we recognize people when they get to their 25th year. We don't invite them back 26, 27, 28. Under your wording, we'd have to bring everybody back every year.
Correct. Correct, at that last meeting where we had done that recognition, because there had not been the convocation,
Right.
were there other milestones? I guess I was trying to recognize the milestones, but of course, no, not 26, 27, 28.
No,
So
we
there-
don't, it's 25, that's it.
Okay.
So we have, doesn't mean we couldn't do more than that, but that's been,
Okay.
the practice has been 25 years.
So not to confuse
Right.
matters with 26,
Fine.
27, that's
Or
why
30
he
or 40 or.
was not thinking that was a good...
Okay, sorry, I was thinking in terms of milestones, so I'm fine with just the
Other-
redacting of each.
Other board comments on items number 4 or 5? Mr. Convertito.
Can I just have the reading back of 4?
Well, you want the whole thing worded or
what
just
was
the first
changed?
line?
What was changed?
The first line says, "Invite students who achieve state, regional, or national recognition to BOE meetings," period. And then the rest of it reads the same. The word "each" was removed, in line with the concept of flexibility. So, if Mr. Convertito has read it, are we ready to act on the motion regarding items 4 and 5? Hearing no hands raised or seeing no hands raised. All in favor of the motion that says the Board of Education approve the recommendations number 4 and 5 from the Ad hoc Communications Committee report, and that they be implemented at the discretion of the chair, reminding you that the word "each" was removed from the first line. All in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Kennelly, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton. All opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mrs. Carnell, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn. Abstentions? The motion fails for lack of a positive vote one way or the other. So that completes that action on that agenda item. Let's see, we're on to 11A, discussion of board goals. We distributed copies of the prior board goals that the board had worked on. They had voted in favor of 5 goals, which through discussion you know is to update the budget development process, to work on communications, to have training on Robert's rules, to have training on roles and responsibility, and to update the mission and goals, educational goals that are set by policy. We have acted on everything except for the mission and goals, which is in the policy committee awaiting recommendation to the full board. And so we are ready to act on these. We are not here to put any motions forward. We're here so that board members know that the process that we used the last time, and that I presume that we will use this time, is that board members who may have individual goals that they wish to present for the full body to consider would send those to me, and we will add them to this list, and then we would return the updated list to the entire board and ask them to rate and rank them, and then I would compile those numbers, if you will, and bring them back to the board. And last year, we did a kind of a 2-step process. Here are the top 5, and see if there's any board members that, if their particular goal didn't make it into the top 5, did they want to advance an argument that might cause it to end up in the top 5. And then we acted and approved, quote, 5 goals. This board could decide to say, we're going to work on 1 goal because it's really, really important, or 2 or 3 or 4. I think for the board, given time to try and do more than 5 would be difficult, but that's the discretion of the board. So that's the process. Are there any questions on the process? The intent on the agenda was to get this in front of you and make sure you understood the process, and any comments on either the process and where we are going. There's a quick turnaround time between now, Thanksgiving, and December 10th. And so unless you get it to me real quick, in all likelihood, I'm probably not going to be able to put this on the December 10th calendar, but rather put it on the January 14th agenda. There's no magic to when we approve these. Of course, the longer it takes us to approve them, the shorter time we have to work on them. And so if everybody were to get it to me tonight before you go to sleep, then I will get it back to you. But if you
Tonight
don't...
before you go to sleep.
But if you don't, then be aware that it'll either be on the December meeting or the first January meeting. Any questions on process or anything else? Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Convertito?
could I ask that we table item A to the January meeting, since it seems imminent to me from the discussions previous in the evening that we are going to have a discussion on board goals at the December 10th meeting and how they're going to be formulated, so I'd ask that this be tabled to the January
I'm not sure that a table motion is necessary, since you've asked, as opposed to saying I want to officially. I've stated my intent that this will be put on the January 14th agenda, because there's just not going to be room on the December 10th meeting to deal with the health insurance and preliminary discussion on the budget and other items. So I think, Mr. Convertito, your recommendation is going to be followed anyways. Any other comments on board goals? Okay. Board member input on the 2014-15 budget. You have the calendar of the budget that was handed out to people previously. You have the memo that the board had received and approved by consensus as to the process that we're going to use. There is one of these items, in case you did not notice that, on the board goals, which was the concept of looking at aligning the budget to goals and metrics. It's kind of a similar subject to what Mrs. Lou McCormick brought up, and so that is, if you will, already on our agenda to consider. And so if it's on the board goals agenda, it will be something that you can also look at and weigh in on that. Other than that, this document stands as is. Any questions or comments that people want to make on the development of the board budget, recognizing that the number crunching is ongoing, as you know. Mr. Fatterbean, followed by Mr. Llewellyn.
The only comment I have on this document, or objection I might have with it, or do have with it, I guess, is the January 21st review executive summary with comments, questions focused on major costs. I would just prefer that, well, what I would get rid of focused on major costs. I think that we should have provided an opportunity at the board to focus on whatever we want to focus on at that time. And then we have follow-up on January 28th of revised by individual department and line item costs. So in other words, I think in order to progress into being able to ask intelligent questions on the second meeting, we can't just be limited to major costs. We should be somewhat free rein as to ask whatever you deem to be important, so that you can better be prepared based on the answers and information provided to discuss more intelligently the line items. So in other words, I don't think that 21st meeting should be limited pretty much in any way as to what you can ask.
This document was presented back in September to the board, and so this has been what the staff have been working off of since September, but I don't think that any board member, I'll say the intent of this is to say, let's take the big picture look, and then at the next meeting get down into the detail. I think in order to understand the big picture, if a board member had a question on a particular detail, I don't think that would be out of line. I would only caution the board that if the December 21st meeting is how come this went up by $1,500 type of questioning, the January 21st, we'll have a long meeting. So the intent was to kind of take a big picture view and then line by line, but certainly individual board members can ask about a line that may help them understand the larger issue. It's not intended to prevent board members from asking questions, just that try and give guidance so that we can take a 177-page document and find some logical way to go through it, so that we don't have one board member saying, I want to talk about page 15, and the next one saying, how about page 162, and then another one, how about page 51, to find. We have in the past normally tried to go through it in some methodical fashion. That's the only intent of this document. Any other comments or questions on the budget?
I have them. I'm still here? Okay, a couple things. One is I've got a handout here. I'd like to ask that a couple columns be added into the book for clarity's sake. You'll notice that in the beginning, you'll all be very familiar with this page here, there are no actuals. So if we could put an actual in front of the budget column, and if we could also, because we are halfway through the year when the budget comes out, put a latest estimate in as well, that would be great, and then we can see versus latest. So if we are able to have an actual laid in there next to the budget, I think the actual is far more pertinent than what the budget was last year, since there are categories that have changed. The other thing I would say is, since we are new and did not have the opportunity to comment back in September, I would hope that there is a heavy target on overhead and that we are striving to leave our programs alone this year. So if we could do that, that would be great. And then what is the procedure this year for voting? Will we be voting on a line-by-line basis?
No, we vote on the budget. And then
And in the past years, it was line-by-line, correct? Not the last year or so, but prior to that, wasn't it in categories, the 100s, the 200s, the 300s?
No, we reviewed it in categories, and then after all reviews are made, board members can make individual suggestions on line items if they wish, add or subtract, and then once those amendments are made, then we end up a final main motion voting on the total budget.
Okay, and what I would like to ask is that, unlike last year where we took it and divided it into two buckets, as we get down to the short straws, I would like to be able to vote on individual line items. In other words, you take, music with gifted extension, with computers, with whatever, and you've got to approve this group of 5 or not approve them. I don't think we should be limiting ourselves to either or on major groups when we get down to the end.
Thank you. Any other comments on the budget? I remind the board that this is the, quote, superintendent's budget, that they crunch through the math, and that he takes seriously individual comments, but sometimes either the software system can't present something in the columns that you suggest or the exact way that you suggest, and whether the board wants to take the kind of line-by-line description or the combination of lines approach, we can talk about that in January and act on the discretion of the board, on the interest of the majority of the board. Any other questions on the budget or comments on the budget?
Actually, through the chair to
I'm sorry.
the superintendent.
This is Lou McCormick.
Thank you. Just curiosity, are actuals available for this?
We review the actuals on a quarterly basis, and so the next time we review will be in January based on the third quarter
So the last actual would have been September.
that we review, yes.
Okay, so September actuals are available.
Yes, we could, you were not members of the board, we could provide you with a copy of the quarterly review document that is normally distributed to the board, which would be for September, which we looked at in October. New board members are interested in that document, or do you
Please.
already have it?
Yes.
So we will provide that to you. On to the student calendar.
Now, this is the hot topic. At 10:40. The good news is you don't have to vote on it tonight.
Yes.
So let me just tell you that it's possible this is the last year you get to vote on this. Legislation that was passed in the last session requires that for the 15-16 year, the board adopt a regional calendar that is supposed to be decided by the state. But for this year, you still have choices to make. What we've done here is put the calendar out that mirrors the calendar we have this year. So there are no changes of any sort. The year would begin, as it always has, the week prior to Labor Day. Labor Day is as early as it can be this year, September 1st, and the first full day of school is Thursday, August 28th. The holidays are noted. Rosh Hashanah falls during the week. Yom Kippur does not. The same pattern of days off for professional development and holiday vacation periods are in as they have been this past year. We put in, it's been our practice to try to mirror the CES calendar for vacations where we can, because we share a lot of programs with CES, and it helps us with transportation and a lot of other areas because we do send kids to CES programs. And so there's always some debate about where the spring vacation should go. Our default is to follow the CES calendar, so you see it there in the week of April 13th. Hopefully we don't end up with 10 no school days, but in any event, the board's tradition is that we tack on days at the end of the year until we hit the basically last week in June, and then once we hit that week, then we would take days out of the April vacation. So that builds 6 snow days into the calendar. You don't set the high school graduation date till after April 1st, which gives you some more flexibility. So that's the calendar as it is, presented to you as a draft, and typically the final vote on this is done at the next meeting, because people start making travel plans very early and appreciate having a heads up on what the vacation schedule will look like for the following year. So that's pretty much how we put it together. And to answer questions, or however you want to handle it from here, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, Ms. Carnell, and then followed by Mrs. Gerber.
Thank you. I know in the past we had a February break and it was taken out. I assume it was just snow days. I could be wrong. I know February seems to have a long weekend, a Friday, Monday. Is there a way that that can be extended so that that's a big gap, the kids go from January to April, and make that an official sort of longer weekend?
That 2 years ago was a debatable issue. Mr. Convertito brought it to the recommendation that's kind of contained in this at the moment, and that's a valid question to ask at the next meeting and see which way the board wishes to go.
Now,
whether that makes sense to stay with it as we've had it the last couple of years or dial back.
Now, the most important question, as you referred that I'm from Brooklyn, we always started after Labor Day. Why do we start before Labor Day?
Because that's the way it's always been done. No, I have no clue. Honestly, I have no clue.
Well, is
Dr.
that
Teitel,
something
do
that
you
can
have
be
a
discussed?
comment on that?
Well, schools used to start after Labor Day. As the school year got extended, used to be school year was 180 days. It used to be there's maybe 1, maybe 2 additional work days for teachers that had to be fit in, and so you could start after Labor Day and still have a reasonable end of the year. In the mid to late 80s, as school years got extended beyond 180, and we're at 182, as additional professional development days were negotiated into teachers' contracts. We have, you have to fit 187 days into the same bucket you used to fit maybe 181 into. And as the weather got worse and the year started ending later and later, people started to say, hey, the kids are ready to come back. And, a day in late August is better than a day in late June. But that's the reason why. I mean, it always looks odd when Labor Day is on Monday. Right? I mean, so you're starting, relatively early. However, anything you do to tack on days means you have to make a decision about the end of the year, because if you want to stay with not going past June 19th in this example, if you add days to February and add days in the beginning, then you're probably going to run out of days and you'll end up taking out of April. So there's no good way around this. And I actually am quite agnostic on calendars. You tell us when the 182 days are, we'll make the best of them. I'll alert you to what the consequences might be and what the history might be, but, if you want to start school on September 8th and go till June 30th, knock yourselves out, but I don't think that would be too popular.
One of the other comments, and then I'll go to Mrs. Lou McCormick, And for the, I think the public has heard me say this before. I'm a more informal person. My personal preference is just to refer to you each by your first name. Would make it easier for me and all the rest, but the custom has been not, so I will continue to do that. And I apologize if I stumble over a two-name last name from time to time. That I think probably more important than anything is kind of the stability from year to year, and if parents start saying, well, what do you think it's going to be this year? Because the board said, well, let's add this, and no, let's change it this way. The instability of calendars for people to count on probably would eventually wear thin, but nonetheless, Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I'm sure you've considered this
sorry,
before.
I forgot. I'm sorry. I apologize to Mrs. Gerber. Mrs. Gerber, followed by Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Yeah, well, I guess through the chair to Dr. Title, one question that we get every year is why can't we have March vacation, because private schools do. And in the past, we've always said, well, because of CMTs. But next year, we won't have CMTs. But I'm assuming we don't know what, it's just,
Right.
we've already been asked that question.
No,
and we've been asked in previous years. So it's one of those things where, if we have more flexibility because of the aspect, although I realize that you don't even know when they're going to be this year. But I'm just saying, just to put it
Right.
out there, would it make any sense to even look at that, or is it such a vague thing? And I'd forgotten about the CES too, so I understand that we
Right.
want to keep it that. But just to put it out there, because it is a question that we get asked every year, and we will get asked this year, and because we don't have the CMT to fall back, are there
Right.
other reasons why we wouldn't want to look into March?
Yeah,
So
we
just
just
wanted to-
don't know what the schedule is going to be for that testing when it comes out. We understand they're going to give us a window, a larger window to get the kids tested in because it's going to be on computer, it's not going to be paper and pencil. But the reason they're giving you the wider window is because we have to cycle kids through all the computers, and that you just can't test everybody at once. So it's really up in the air about how long the window is going to be, when it's going to start, if they're going to be mandatory days. So it's a big question mark. We just don't know right now what that's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like this year, and we don't know what it's going to look like next year. But it certainly would be within the purview of the board to move that vacation into March if you so desired. I mean, there's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing there. Obviously, we have some conferences in there for elementary that would have to get moved if you moved it to that particular week that's the week of March 23rd. But we do try to stay with CES because there are some cost savings attached to running buses on the same schedule as CES, and that's sort of traditionally when we've done it, but it can be changed. I can't give you any information about the SBAC window. They keep changing the rules, like, on a weekly basis.
Thank you. My apologies
Mr. Chair, may I
again to
make a
Mrs.
motion to
Gerber.
extend the meeting?
Huh?
May I make a motion as we're getting close to extend the meeting? So we have adequate time for public comment?
What time do you wish to extend the meeting to? Be careful.
Midnight. I don't know, 11:15.
Motion on the floor to extend the meeting to 11:15.
I second.
Ms. Carnell seconds it. Any discussion on that? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. It's unanimous. The meeting is 11:15. Thank you. Final comments, so we can move on and make sure that we do have
Yeah,
public
I'll make
comment?
this really quick. Just wondering if we've considered using the professional development days to either move to the beginning in August so that we can push it to after Labor Day, or to aggregate them together so that we can then create a synthetic week of vacation.
The logic of spreading them out like this, I think, is the
Yeah.
essence of the question.
Yeah, they are grouped in the beginning a bit. The 3 days before the students come in, there's different things going on. And part of that is getting our professional development in. Part of that is orientation for new, for students in grades 6 and 9. Part of it is just, having teachers be able to work in their rooms and get them ready. So there's probably the equivalent of 2 of those 3 PD days are up at the front before the kids come in. But then it's logical in terms of professional learning to spread them out a bit over the course of the year, so that we can, learn, apply, and so forth. And we use Election Day as a day to do the PD because it's not safe to have the kids in school, so that's an easy day to pick up. So we do like to spread them out. We do front end a bit of it, the 2 at the beginning, because if we're going to be implementing something new, we want to have a couple days to get ready for that. But then ongoing through the year also works for us. So that's the rationale for it.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah.
You're going to kill me. Mr. Convertito.
Just one last quick, and I'll bring it up when we vote on this. The February 3rd Professional Development Day, I've gotten feedback on that. It's kind of disruptive because the only full week in February is the last week. So I'd be looking to either move that up to the 10th or back to the week of the 20th sometime, just so people are aware of that notion. Okay?
And Dr. Title takes whatever comments are brought in, and then he'll bring the calendar back, either adjusted for that or simply saying, here's the calendar as it's traditionally been, and board members may amend it as people suggest. We'll move on now to item 11E,
Mr. Dreyer?
discussion of board assignments.
Mr. Dreyer, I apologize, but this would be through you to Dr. Title regarding the calendar, that if we don't have information on the CMT and capped science tests for March, if there's anything known about that, and then secondly, if there were any budget numbers of the implication of moving that April break.
Yep. Yeah, I expect that capped science will still be given, capped and CMT science will still be given in the spring of 2015. We know it's being given in the spring of 2014, but the new science test is probably not online until 2016. So I will research what if the window they're going to give us on that is going to be the same. We may end up in the same boat. That's a good point. We'll try to identify what they're planning to do with that, because that could gum things up in terms of moving the vacation into March. And I will look into the implications. I'll check with the elementary folks about the implications of moving the PD that you mentioned. And if other people have ideas like, I'm not sure about this, can you check to see what the implications would be, please let me know, because sometimes it's hard at the table to respond to changes. Okay?
Dr. Title is good, but doing back-of-the-envelope math on changes is dicey at best. Moving on to 11E, discussion of board assignments. Each of you has the list in front of you that describes the various committees. Please get to me any interest that you have. For those, especially the policy committee, that has a meeting fairly quickly after this meeting, the 3 members who are on the policy committee should continue to serve in that role until changes are made based on all of the assignments, so that you are clear, and then you can look forward to the January meeting for the reorganization meeting. In all likelihood, there will be changes to existing members' assignments. If not, we would be limited to receiving ideas from the new members to only those committees that people have vacated. And I think there ought to be a little bit more flexibility than that. And so existing members of existing committees, I always joke, with the exception of Mr. Fatterbean, that if you wish to change your assignment, you don't have to just call me with what you'd like to have. You could also tell me what you don't want to have. I do joke with Mr. Fatterbean that he has a lifetime appointment to the Transportation Advisory Committee, Safety Advisory Committee, but indeed, if he wants to give another board member an opportunity and a board member wanted to serve on that committee, you are also free. You are also free to say, move me along. So let me hear from you. Number 12, open board public comment. Public comment. Do we have members of the public which wish to speak? We have a closing time of 11:15. We do have a few items under open board comment, and so I need to finish the public comment in time to allow open board comment. So if I could get everybody to walk up who is intending on speaking, that will give me a guidance. I have 3 members at the moment, so I think that we should not have a problem meeting that time schedule. Please state your name and address, and take advantage of the 2 minutes.
Nancy Haberly, 30 Duck Farm Road. I understand that the principals are currently working on their teacher evaluations, and I'm just wondering the time frame for those evaluations and what, where do those evaluations go? Do they go to the district? Do they go to the state? And what the deadline is, like when will that process be completed? And then also I'm wondering, the school's improvement plans, are those available to the parents, and when would they be available to the parents? Is there a deadline for those type of things? Thank you.
Thank you very much. State your name and address.
Yes. Sorry.
It
Kelly
still
J-
works, so we won't be charging you for it.
Don't take away from my time. Kelly Jacobson,
Please do.
Acorn Lane in Southport. So I'm here because ahead of this meeting, as a member of the PTAC, I received a copy of the standardized test results, or the report, Dr. Title's reports. And I have to say I'm very disappointed with kind of the lack of depth and granularity within that report. My feeling is that, and just so you're aware, I have a second grader and two younger ones, so I'm just kind of getting myself acclimated with sort of the reporting that goes on here. When I look at the report that I see, and I've looked at the full report also that's online, I see not much more than a data dump. I see 1 page of kind of a description of what's gone on and 30 pages of charts. What I don't see is I don't see any school-related data, and I haven't been presented my school data, and what I feel like is necessary is a standardized way of looking at individual school report, a way of taking the data, instead of lumping it by grade, by subject, breaking it out further. There's tons of, when you go to the CMT test site, you can pull all this data on your own, and I'm just not sure why we don't have it, why we don't see strand level data. And by not having all of this detailed level data, how are we really going to take action, and how are we going to know what schools are doing really well and learn from those, and how are we going to know what schools aren't doing well and make those a priority and put money behind them? So I'm just really disappointed at what I'm seeing here, and I just wonder why we're lacking. And by comparison, what I've been able to find online is I've been able to find a couple of reports in one DRG A district and one DRG B district. That's West Hartford and Westport. And I suggest that everybody take a look at what these look like and see what other districts are doing, because by comparison, I feel like our reporting is really pales in comparison to what we have here. And so what I actually have is several copies of the Westport report and then a single copy of the West Hartford report, which, if you don't mind, I'll just bring it up.
Why don't you give it to our secretary, and she can make sure it gets distributed to everybody.
And just one last thing, I see I'm time. I feel like I'm an Oscar, but
The pink sheet hasn't been raised yet, so
I
keep
think
going.
she did.
It has been
Yeah,
raised.
she did.
So I do.
You know, our kids spend so much time with standardized
Please,
testing.
Please,
Okay.
one of the struggles I always have is keeping faith
Right.
with the time frame. So.
And fair enough, we spent
'Cause I
4
can't
hours
cut you
on
off.
addending and not addending, and we had no questions tonight about the report on the standardized testing, and I don't quite understand that.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Sure. Tricia Donovan, Tainter Drive. And at the risk of being a little bit redundant, I too want to talk about the CMT analysis. From where I'm sitting as a parent, it's yet another failed communication piece from the district. The analysis is incomplete at best. First, it pairs 2 absolutes, 2006, the first fourth-generation administration, against the final administration in 2013. And second, you say of the 24 possible subject grade combinations, 20 show improvement from start to finish. This implies that there has been a linear upward progression from 2006 to 2013, which when we look into the data we know is not true for every school, every subject, every cohort, every subgroup. This is very much a one-size-fits-all look at our district instead of an in-depth review that acknowledges the many strengths, weaknesses, and diversity of our district. By simply going into ConnecticutReports.com, I can see how each school does over time, by subject, by cohort, by gender, by subgroup, by performance level. I can even pull them out, and what I did is I marked here. I compared the 3rd grade to the 4th grade results, 2012 to 13, of all the different elementary schools. And when you see the red and the green, all the reds are the number of advanced students decline in mathematics, and the greens, the 3 greens, are the 3 schools that are advancing our mathematics students from 3rd grade to 4th grade. Okay. Yet you have not shared any of this data with us. The district should be putting an even tighter lens on all of this data, especially knowing that it piloted a new instructional model in math in 2010 in 4 lead schools and rolled it out later to other schools. What was the effect of this rollout on our results? Did they have to make adjustments to our instruction given those results? Also, how many students had to repeat sections of the CAT until they passed? And what sections are most highly affected? What subgroup, if any, repeats the most? Has the repeat rate improved over time? These are just a few of the questions we should be asking and sharing in our analyses. Without a truly comprehensive look at our test results, we fail to communicate to parents, town bodies, and the wider taxpaying community.
If you just finish one sentence, please.
Yes, that we have correctly set our educational priorities and allocated our educational dollars.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, and do I assume this is the last speaker? I don't see anybody standing up. Thank you.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I just want to thank the Communications Committee from last year. I was the Board of Ed rep for Dwight, and I think that you did capture the feedback that you did get from the PTAs. I am the PTA president at Roger Ludlow Middle School this year, and it's a struggle from the PTA side to try to communicate all the work that you do at the board table to our community. You know, my Board of Ed rep for the middle school is still here, but it's late, and I think that I hope that you revisit this work. I think that it's important. Everybody wants to I hear so much about getting more parents involved, and this just seems like a great way to do it. So thank you for your work, and I hope it continues
Thank you
in
very
some
much.
format.
One comment, if you will, on the CMT capped. There's actually more information this year that's been posted on the website than in past years, and there's more detailed on the website than what was just in the handout, if you will. But Dr. Title, do you have any other comment that you wish to make?
Well, no, you can always do a more in-depth analysis, and the board does get, in the summer, once the reports come out, the school-by-school reporting and the historical school-by-school reporting. This was not intended to be a school-by-school report. That's done at the school level. We have a district data team that is disaggregating and looking at strands and really digging into this. But you know, yes, you can always do more in depth on these scores. Absolutely. Just on the teacher evaluation system, the deadline has not changed on that. Just so people know, we still have to complete an evaluation for every teacher by June 30th of the year, and those evaluations have to be concluded under the new system and done, you know, before the teachers leave, and they are not subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act, and so they simply go into the teacher's personnel record and are not shared outside of that. We may need to send some aggregate information about our teacher evaluation plan to the state, but we're not anticipating that we'll be sending anything about teacher evaluation about individual teachers to the state. And school improvement plans, when they're finished, we encourage the schools to not only share them, but also put them on the school websites. So, thank you.
Some points of information, and then other board members who may have a comment that they wish to make. Many of you know that we have a board handbook that references various policies and practices and bylaws, and the changes to the bylaws that have been made or that will be made may affect some of the wording in here, but and some of the wording already needs to be updated, if nothing else, to have the letter come from me as opposed to Pam Iacona. But we have been holding this back until the policy committee completes the recommendation and the board takes action on the educational goals, which are in here. And so once that occurs, then all the other suggestions that have come forth at some point at a date to be determined, this will come back to the board so that we can conform it, not change it, but conform it. Of course, if the board members have something they want to change, they can, to conform it to whatever decisions we've made in the meantime, but not trying to do this every change, but bring it once all of the changes we have known will be brought forward. You see before you a copy of the proposed BOE meeting dates. And so these will be the meeting dates. The town clerk requires that we provide this to them in December. And so once these get posted, these are considered the regular meetings of the board. And if we change a regular meeting, it becomes a special meeting. Even if you change it by one day, you no longer call it a regular meeting, it's called a special meeting. So count on this being the meeting dates that you should start putting in your calendars. Third, you got a big packet of information at your table, which is the business curriculum documents. These will be officially presented on December 10th. And board members are welcome to ask questions about it. They won't be voted until the January meeting. Our practice has been to present in one meeting and vote at the next meeting, but given the Thanksgiving and other holidays, we thought that you would rather read these than watch the Detroit Lions lose yet another game. Policies are in front of you, and that's it. Any other open board comments? People interested in adjourning or not? Ms. Carnell and Mr. Patton.
I like it better when you call me Donna, but
I do too, but
I'm not sure
Microphone.
if this is an appropriate
please do.
question at this time, but from listening to the comments from the audience, obviously majority of the 3 or 4 people that spoke seemed to be very concerned about the stats and maybe the lack of the information they're receiving. And Dr. Title, you had mentioned that clearly stats can be presented many different ways. Do you and your administration look at the stats in great depth to understand which schools may be doing better and others not? And what are you doing about that to help the teachers or the schools that aren't doing as well?
Yeah, I think Dr. Title's comment, he'll present as well, is that his district leadership team, which is the central office leaders and each principal, a headmaster, delve into the details and strands and whatnot. So the answer is yes, but Dr. Title may wish to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more analysis that's done internally than is in the report. Schools do their own analysis. You know, school results can vary a lot because your N sizes are kind of small. You know, some of our schools have 40 kids in a grade. You know, we do look at results over time, although there's not comparability in terms of the degree of difficulty from one grade to the next, so the state is very careful about what you can do with that. So the curriculum leaders with the teachers do spend a lot of time digging into this. The individual schools do. My intent with this was, for the first time, that anybody can remember, put something out as a summary document. And looking back at everything that's been presented publicly, the most I could find was maybe a 2-page sort of a summary. And so with the test essentially ending, it was intended to be an overview, but there is a scouring at great detail done at lots of different levels on this. I was looking at this sort of 30,000-foot picture. So that's was the purpose of that.
Mr. Patton has
I just want to ask a question to that.
Follow-up.
I'm sorry.
I will say that on open board comment, it is not a continuation of the meeting of question and answer and debate and all that. It's really so that people can share an initial concern.
Then I'll just ask, when is the time when we have the question and answers for board members?
Two places. The budget development goal that includes establishing metrics and goals related to student performance is going to be a topic that will be discussed at the January meeting, given time. So you'll be able to talk about setting a goal that sets specifically that, so that would be one time. When we discuss the budget, we frequently have reports on student achievement. So in January at the other meetings would be a time for that to be discussed as well. And if we adopt the goal around metrics and whatnot, well, then that will become something that is a work in progress that will be reported back to the board frequently.
Thank you.
Patton, did you have any hand raised or not?
I did.
Yes.
As I'm propping my head up to keep myself awake. 2 comments. One is especially based on tonight's meeting. I know in one of the old board goals was it was a crash course in Robert's Rules of Order, which I guess the old board did at the end of last year. I think it'd be very helpful I know the RTM does it at the beginning of each new session. If we could get even a mini version of that, I think there's members that could definitely benefit from just knowing the proper procedures of how to do this. You had a whole bunch of crazy things tonight. You had challenges to motions, which is a rare thing, and nobody really knew how to react to that. On a positive note, I think it was last week, Mr. Dwyer and I attended a very interesting meeting in, was it Weston or Westport? Westport. That was run by the Westport State Representative and some local aficionados there on funded and partially funded and unfunded state mandates, which we're all familiar with, between things like the new teacher evaluations and the Common Core and CMT or SBAC testing and all those sorts of things. Instead of it being a lot of complaining, there was superintendents from several school systems, there was directors of education from reading and math programs, and one of the final things that came out, actually, I think after Mr. Dwyer had to go, that I observed, and I think it was Superintendent Landon, who is, again, of Westport, that kind of summed it up. And it wasn't that the superintendents or the staff of their offices are against a lot of these new initiatives that have been coming up, or these unfunded state mandates that, the state just says, you got to do this, and we're not paying you any to change your policies, was that it's not that some of these things are bad, it's just the way that the state, assembly has voted on these things to mandate how they're implemented that is just causing undue stress on education systems in the state of Connecticut. It was fairly universal between department heads, between parents, between at least the superintendents who spoke, that there are lots of good things in the new Common Core. There are lots of good things in the new teacher evaluation systems, but it's kind of how these things are being implemented and forced down the throats of education systems in towns that are the issues. And I guess, as we all know, the state legislature, the education committee of the state legislature has to bring these things up in its own committee and then decide on an action in its own committee to then bring to the state legislature. And in a short session like they'll have up in January, these are really tough things to do, but at least the local state reps have seemed to kind of want to band together to try and push this thing, push these changes in to maybe help the education systems of the towns of Connecticut, so that maybe not this year, but maybe next year, some of these burdens will be lessened.
Thank you.
I just thought you'd all like to know.
We can't extend the meeting again. We are only allowed to extend it once, so I think we are in the point where we need to have a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Patton, all in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
We were supposed to be. I was like, anybody go? I'm going to go. And I'm like,
I left this in my suitcase.
He's like, all right, I'm out of here.